Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bianca Roberson. Bianca Roberson, born on October 17, 1998, Bianca grew up to be a remarkable individual. She excelled at Bayard Rustin High School, earning straight A's and graduating with honors. Her impressive academic record earned her a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University in Florida, where she planned to major in criminal justice and pursue her dream of becoming an FBI forensic agent. Bianca was a multi-talented young woman who had been involved in various activities throughout her life. She was a Girl Scout, a cheerleader, and a basketball player. She also had a passion for music, taking lessons in flute, violin, clarinet, and guitar. Additionally, she was an artist. Bianca lived with her mother and maternal grandmother, Josephine Perry, and was excited to experience the independence and challenges of dorm life. However, her plans were tragically cut short. On June 28, 2017, Bianca, her mother, and grandmother went shopping at Walmart to prepare for her upcoming move to Florida. Bianca Roberson was tragically killed in a car accident on a road she knew well. The incident occurred just 10 minutes after she left a Walmart parking lot. Witnesses quickly called 911 and first responders rushed to the scene. Unfortunately, paramedics were unable to save Bianca, and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Initial observations suggested that Bianca's severe head injuries were caused by her car veering off the road. However, as police interviewed eyewitnesses, a crucial detail emerged. A witness reported that Bianca's car had collided with a red pickup truck, which had fled the scene without stopping. As she drove home to meet her granddaughter, Bianca's grandmother was worried about the traffic and wondered if it might be related to Bianca. However, she had no idea that the cause of the traffic jam was actually a car crash involving Bianca. When she arrived home, she was met with devastating news. 2 police officers were waiting to inform her that Bianca had been killed in the accident. For Michelle, Bianca's mother, the news was almost too much to bear. Losing a child is every parent's worst nightmare. Michelle, a nurse from Delaware County, was still grieving the loss of her 22-year-old son, M.L. James Rowley, who had passed away from a heart condition in 2013. She had hoped that time would ease her pain, but instead, it had only intensified with the loss of her daughter. Michelle Robertson is struggling to cope with the loss of her second child. "I'm just existing," she said, feeling lost and without purpose. Her children were her reason for getting up in the morning, and now she feels like a mom without kids. After her divorce from Rodney Robertson in 2006, they managed to put aside their differences and work together as amicable co-parents thanks to their daughter Bianca. Michelle acknowledged that their divorce was not easy, but Bianca's presence helped to calm the tension. "Bianca didn't like it when I spoke harshly to her mother, and she would correct me," he said. Bianca's love for her family, especially her father, brought them closer together. Rodney admitted that Bianca was his favorite, and her devotion to family was inspiring. Bianca's father proudly said that his daughter was one step closer to achieving her dream of becoming an FBI forensic specialist. Bianca was excited to be on her own, but her future career was her main focus. Her hard work had paid off, as she had received a 4-year merit scholarship to Jacksonville University, one of the 3 schools that had accepted her out of the 4 she had applied to. Bianca's father said she had also been accepted to Coastal Carolina and the University of Georgia. Investigators were seeking CCTV footage to confirm the initial belief that Bianca's car veered off the road after colliding with a red pickup truck. If this were the case, it would imply that Bianca's death was no accident, but rather a deliberate act that required the police to identify a perpetrator. However, the truth revealed during the investigation proved even more stunning. While awaiting the CCTV footage, a significant development in the case occurred. It was initially assumed that Bianca's death resulted from her car crashing and hitting her head. Yet, during the autopsy, forensic experts made a startling discovery: there was a bullet in Bianca's head. This revelation drastically altered the course of the investigation. What initially seemed like an accident and later a collision with a red pickup truck was revealed to be a death caused by a gunshot wound to the head. The autopsy report's findings prompted detectives to meet with Bianca's family, bringing devastating news that her death was no accident. This revelation sent shockwaves, especially for her mother, Michelle, who couldn't fathom why anyone would harm her daughter. Bianca had a close-knit relationship with those around her, and her family couldn't identify anyone who might have wished her harm. Desperate for answers, the Robertson family relied on investigators to identify the person responsible for Bianca's tragic death. Upon reviewing the security footage from the Walmart her family visited on the day of her death, detectives found no suspicious activity. The detectives closely examined the family's actions from the moment they left their cars to the time they departed the parking lot. They dismissed the possibility that someone from Walmart could have followed Bianca and shot her, as she had not argued with anyone during their visit. The family had simply shopped, loaded their purchases into Bianca's car, and left. The investigation suggested that the motive for Bianca's death might be linked to an incident that occurred while she was driving home on the highway. Bianca's mother recalled, "We packed all the bags into Bianca's car," referring to the 2009 Chevy Malibu they had purchased for her 16th birthday from CarMax. Michelle recalled that her mother had chosen the car Bianca was driving when she first got her permit. According to Michelle, Bianca's mother said that Bianca had gotten everything she wanted, but Michelle didn't think of her as spoiled. Instead, she believed Bianca was simply loved and also willing to work for the things she desired. In fact, Bianca started her first job at McDonald's when she was 15 and soon switched to a dietary aid position at the Whitehorse Village Retirement Community in Delaware County. Michelle remembered that she had received a large number of letters and cards from the residents at Whitehorse Village who adored Bianca. After the police obtained traffic footage from CCTV cameras, Michelle pointed out that there were no cameras at the exact location where Bianca veered off the road. However, there was a camera about a mile away. To help illustrate the location, Michelle suggested looking at Google Maps. According to the map, Bianca lost control of her car where two lanes merged into one. When investigators reviewed the recording, they found evidence that supported the account of Bianca's encounter with the driver of the red pickup truck. The footage showed their cars traveling side by side, approaching a point where their lanes merged into one. It's possible that the conflict began when one driver failed to yield to the other. Given the tragic outcome, investigators inferred that the driver of the red pickup truck might have been the one who fired the shot. However, the poor quality of the footage made it impossible to read the pickup truck's license plates or see the driver's face. Nevertheless, from that point on, the driver of the pickup truck became the primary suspect in Bianca Roberson's death. Detectives were tasked with identifying the man, but they only had a blurry image to work with. After inquiring with Bianca's family members, it became clear that none of them knew anyone who owned a red pickup truck. The police then re-interviewed the witnesses who were present at the scene and those who had called 911, but unfortunately, none of them had caught a glimpse of the vehicle's license plate. The Bianca Roberson family has received an outpouring of support from friends, strangers, and people of all ages since Bianca's passing. A vigil was held just 2 days after her death, and many have reached out to share their stories and condolences. Bianca's family describes her as a selfless and compassionate person who always put the needs of others before her own. According to her mother, Michelle, Bianca would often take in children who were in need, even if it meant sneaking them into their home without permission. When confronted about her actions, Bianca would simply say that she wanted to help others in the same way she would want someone to help her if she were in a similar situation. This kind of empathy and kindness was evident in many aspects of Bianca's life, including the time she witnessed a car accident and immediately asked her mother if they could stop to help. A kind-hearted woman's first instinct was to invite those eating alone to join her family for dinner. In the aftermath of Bianca's car accident, investigators analyzed footage from distant cameras to determine the direction of the red pickup truck involved in the incident. To gather more details about the truck, including its brand, model, and license plate, they required higher quality footage. The police sought the public's assistance through the media, asking anyone with information about the truck to come forward. Following the accident, the pickup truck turned towards Poi Pike. To find evidence, detectives visited nearby houses and shops, searching for cameras that might have captured the truck. After an extensive search, they found a camera with good quality footage, taken around 5 minutes after witnesses called 911 to report Bianca's car accident. Upon analyzing this footage, detectives saw the red pickup truck driving by shortly after the incident. The investigation continued, but the license plate of the suspect's car remained unknown, and it was unclear if the car in the footage was the same one or just a similar vehicle. However, 2 days after the incident, a new lead emerged when a woman contacted the police, claiming to have seen the car they were searching for. She also reported seeing the driver's face. She described the car as a red pickup truck that overtook her, stopped at the Poi Pike intersection, and then turned left. This information was crucial in narrowing down the search area and also revealed that the pickup truck in the footage was not the actual suspect's vehicle, but rather a similar-looking truck. Her description helped a forensic artist create a sketch of the suspect, who was identified as a white male, 25 to 35 years old, with brown hair and a stubble beard. The police released the suspect's sketch, hoping someone would recognize the person and come forward. They showed the sketch to Bianca's family, but no one recognized the individual. As the investigation continued, detectives began to consider the possibility that Bianca's death was a hate crime. To gather more evidence, the police canvassed the area where the red pickup truck was last seen, visiting homes and businesses near the intersection where it turned left. They were searching for a high-quality surveillance recording that could provide answers to their questions. Their efforts paid off when a homeowner, who lived less than half a mile from the intersection, provided the police with a recording from their driveway surveillance camera. By estimating the time it would take to drive from the crime scene to the homeowner's location, the police quickly found the relevant footage. Although the new footage was of better quality than the previous one, its angle made it impossible for the police to identify the car or its driver. The police worked hard to find another recording from a closer camera, and they got lucky. Although the license plate was not visible, they were able to identify some unique features of the car. These features included a sticker on the right side window, a vertical dent on the passenger door, and damage to the hood. With these details, the police had a much better chance of finding the car. The police sought the public's help in finding the truck and its driver by offering a $5,000 reward for any information that could aid in the investigation. They were confident that someone would recognize the distinctive vehicle. 3 days after Bianca Roberson's death, a lawyer contacted the police station on behalf of a client who wanted to turn himself in, stating that his client was connected to the incident that resulted in Bianca's death. The incident occurred on a recent Wednesday at approximately 5:30 p.m. Bianca Roberson, an 18-year-old who had just graduated from Westchester Rustin High School, was driving on Route 100, a 2-lane highway, on her way to Jacksonville University. Her life was full of promise, with a loving family and a bright future ahead. As she approached the merge with Route 202, the road narrowed from 2 lanes to 1. A common merge on a southeastern Pennsylvania highway turned deadly last Wednesday when a dispute over positioning escalated into violence. Bianca Roberson was merging from 2 lanes to 1 when a man in a red pickup truck, also merging, became agitated and shot her in the head. The suspect, 28-year-old David Desper of Pennsylvania, surrendered to police with his lawyer. Although he refused to testify, he consented to a search of his home and revealed the location of his pickup truck. David was subsequently arrested and charged with Bianca Roberson's murder. The police tracked down the suspect's vehicle, a pickup truck, at a location David had previously mentioned. Unique features on the truck, such as stickers on the windows and damage to the body, made it unmistakably clear that it was the same truck involved in the crime. The investigators searched David's residence and found the firearm that was used to shoot and kill Bianca Roberson. Despite this major breakthrough in the case, the authorities remained baffled as to the killer's motivation. Over 800 loved ones and members of the community attended a heart-wrenching farewell ceremony at the St. Paul's Baptist Church in the suburban Westchester borough, which lies approximately 25 miles. During the funeral service, many people paid tribute to she, including her brothers, officials from her high school, the chief admissions officer from the university she was set to attend, and friends. In his eulogy, Pastor Wayne Croft Sr. drew a comparison between the shooter and two other infamous cases: George Zimmerman, who shot and killed Trayvon Martin, a black teenager, in Florida in 2012, and was acquitted of murder in 2013, and Michael Dunn, who shot and killed Jordan Davis, another black teenager, in Florida in 2012, after a dispute over music. Dunn was convicted and sentenced to life in prison plus 90 years. The pastor expressed the sentiment of the black community, stating that regardless of whether Bianca's murder was a result of road rage or racism, the fact remains that a brilliant young black woman's life was lost. During the trial in September 2018, David Desper was asked to explain his motive for committing the crime. Instead of providing an answer, he requested forgiveness from Bianca's family. For Bianca's parents, the thought of facing their daughter's alleged killer was daunting. To show their support and unity, Rodney had arranged for family members and friends to wear T-shirts with Bianca's face on the front as they gathered at the Chester County Government Services Center. The family of Bianca Roberson wore bracelets with a poignant message: "Bianca Roberson, a rose in God's garden." They also held a banner that read, "Justice for Bianca Nicole Roberson," a reminder of the tragic event that took her life on June 28, 2017. Rodney, Bianca's father, expressed his uncertainty about how he would react when he saw the man responsible for his daughter's murder. "I don't know what I'll do when I see him," he said. "The man who held the gun that took my daughter's life, he just took her dreams away. He had no right to do that." Michelle, Bianca's mother, struggled to come to terms with the loss of her child. "I want to hold her, comfort her, and bring her back," she said through tears. The prosecutor argued that the traffic conflict occurred because Bianca failed to yield when their lanes merged into one. In response, David Desper rolled down the passenger side window and fired a shot. Realizing the severity of his actions, David Desper fled the scene, leaving his pickup truck with a friend in Pennsylvania, and attempted to escape to Delaware. However, after his sketch and the distinctive features of his pickup truck were publicized in the news, David Desper decided to hire a lawyer and surrender. The police investigated his social media accounts and interviewed his friends but found no evidence to suggest that the crime was motivated by bias. As a result, David Desper was not charged with a hate crime. District Attorney Hogan stated that there was no indication that the crime was racially motivated or a hate crime. However, many people disagreed with this assessment. Before the sentencing, the defense portrayed David Desper as harmless and immature for his age, describing him as a big kid who enjoyed playing with cars in his free time. They argued that David Desper had essentially handed the case to the government by turning himself in. The defense claimed that David Desper was driving home when another car startled him, causing him to fire the gun. They maintained that David Desper was not a menacing individual. Prosecutor Chris Miller countered that a 28-year-old man driving with a loaded firearm is not a big kid. He emphasized that David Desper's actions were those of a responsible adult. Ironically, David Desper's own mother had shared a Facebook post about the police searching for the person who murdered Bianca Roberson, unaware that the suspect was her own son. Wendy Despert expressed her love for Bianca's family and apologized for her son's actions. "I'm so sorry for what my son did," she said, as her son wept. Rodney Robertson struggled to speak through tears as he addressed his daughter's killer. "I have simple questions for the defendant," he said. "Why did you shoot my daughter? Was it because of her youth, her race, her gender, or just because you wanted to go first on the road? Was it simply because you were having a bad day?" Rodney continued, "All my dreams for Bianca were coming true until the day the defendant took her life. Now, all I have left of Bianca are my memories." David Despert pleaded guilty to third-degree murder. The court sentenced him to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft became emotional as she announced the sentence, telling Despert, "I don't believe you were afraid, I believe it was anger." County Judge Anne-Marie Wheatcraft imposed the maximum sentence of 20 to 40 years for that grade of homicide. David Despert attempted to appeal the sentence, but his appeal was denied. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alejandra Lafuente. Alejandra Lafuente was a stunning brunette with captivating hair and bright brown eyes that accentuated her thick, dark eyelashes. She maintained her athletic physique through a dedicated fitness routine, which included yoga and breathing exercises. Taking care of herself was a top priority for Alejandra, and she frequently visited beauty salons, massage parlors, and spas to pamper herself. During warm weather, she could often be found lounging on the beach while still managing to get some scientific work done. On cloudy days, she would opt for tanning salons instead. It's clear that Alejandra had a deep affection for herself and believed she embodied the ideal of female attractiveness. Her career was also thriving, thanks in part to her father's influence. Alberto Dente, a renowned psychiatrist and doctor of sciences, was a leading expert in his field, with a focus on mental health conditions such as schizophrenia and manic disorders. His groundbreaking scientific work and experiments had earned him widespread recognition. Alejandra greatly admired her father and aspired to achieve similar success. She followed in his footsteps by enrolling in a prestigious university to study psychiatry, where she graduated with honors. Her strong work ethic, exceptional intelligence, and her father's influential connections enabled her to complete and defend her thesis on manic syndrome with distinction. However, Alejandra's career took an unexpected turn when she became more interested in working as a psychotherapist rather than pursuing a traditional path in psychiatry. With the financial support of her father, Alejandra obtained the necessary licensing and opened her own practice in a modern business center located in the heart of the capital. Her practice quickly gained popularity, attracting a diverse range of female clients who sought counseling for issues such as eating disorders, depression, relationship problems, and low self-esteem. Alejandra demonstrated a remarkable ability to help her clients resolve complex family issues. Despite her professional success, her personal life faced challenges. Her first marriage ultimately ended in divorce, but it was blessed with two beautiful daughters who inherited Alejandra's captivating eyes and her father's sharp sense of humor. Alejandra wasn't discouraged despite having two children. She still wanted to meet someone who could be a good partner and father to her daughters. After her separation, her ex-husband would visit on weekends to spend time with she and help with household chores. However, his last visit would be his final one. Alejandra asked him to enter through the backyard, claiming the front door lock was jammed. She then directed him to the bathroom, saying their youngest daughter was bathing. Unaware of the danger, he complied. The house was eerily silent, with no cartoons or children's laughter. Upon entering the bathroom, he noticed tape on the floor and an empty bathtub. At that moment, he realized something was wrong. Alejandra stood behind him, wielding a hammer. She delivered two forceful blows to his head, causing him to collapse with blood pouring from his skull. The experts later determined that the first blow was fatal, and he had no chance of saving himself. The eldest daughter returned home early from a friend's house and became an unintentional witness to a horrific scene. The children had often seen their parents arguing, and Alejandra, who was believed to have mental health issues, would frequently lash out at her friends and even physically attack her husband. Her friends and housemates had observed her outbursts and erratic behavior on multiple occasions. On this particular day, the situation escalated out of control. The daughter fled the house and called for help, prompting a neighbor to rush over and contact the police. Alejandra, a psychologist, was arrested and charged with murder. She spent a month in a cell awaiting her initial court hearing. During the trial, Alejandra maintained her innocence. Her lawyers argued that she had acted in self-defense, claiming that her ex-husband was excessively jealous and had fabricated stories about her bringing men into the house, which could harm the mental well-being of their daughters. According to their version of events, on the day of the crime, the ex-husband had shown up unexpectedly at Alejandra's house, entering through the back door in an attempt to catch her with another man. He then allegedly attacked Alejandra, who was in the bathroom trying to assemble a nightstand. She was forced to defend herself and delivered 2 blows to the back of her ex-husband's head. On June 14, 2012, the court delivered its verdict. Considering the evidence presented by her defense team and the fact that she had 2 young children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months in prison. However, thanks to the efforts of her lawyers and her father's financial support, her prison term was commuted to a suspended sentence. A few months later, her team filed an appeal, requesting that the charges be dropped. The basis of the appeal was that Alejandra had acted in self-defense. Human rights activists rallied around her, calling for a jury trial and portraying her as a victim of domestic violence. The court reviewed her case and ultimately handed down an acquittal. After her release, Alejandra resumed her work as a psychological counselor. She cultivated an image as a victim of gender inequality who had fought for her rights and won. This newfound image boosted Alejandra's popularity among potential clients. She soon met Alan Carrera Cuellar, a wealthy Mexican businessman and the son of Adrian Carrera Francis. Alan was tall, handsome, and impressive. His father had previously headed the Special Services Department for the Central District and had achieved significant success in his career. Soon Alan expanded his business, creating a chain of construction stores that opened across the country. However, while part of his business was legitimate, another part was secretly linked to crime. This connection led to his father's removal from his position after one of Alan's financial frauds was exposed. Furthermore, Alan had a stake in a criminal group that transported psychotropic substances to the United States. Their base, located in a border town, was guarded by corrupt police officers and controlled a small portion of the psychoactive substance trade in the South. Alan's father was found to be involved in his son's activities, and after providing a statement to the police, he faced a 20-year prison sentence. Nevertheless, Adrian Carrera was released early on July 18, 2000, as part of the Witness Protection Program. Upon release, he dedicated himself to his son and legitimate business ventures. His son, Alan Carrera, quickly adopted his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan followed in his father's footsteps and became an entrepreneur, showing particular interest in a household appliance store that he successfully managed despite his young age. This business was smaller than his father's but generated a decent income. Alan was always surrounded by women, yet he had been in love with a classmate since childhood, whom he eventually married. She was intelligent, attractive, and came from a good family. The marriage, though brief, was vibrant and resulted in a beautiful daughter. However, Alan's frequent absence from home due to work led to the breakdown of their marriage, ultimately ending in divorce. Alan struggled to move on from his high school sweetheart. He found no joy in new books and was immersed himself by loneliness and sadness, which led him to develop a drinking problem. To overcome his prolonged depression and alcohol addiction, Alan tried various methods, including books, AA meetings, and therapy. Eventually, he met with Dr. Alberto, a renowned psychiatrist. Meanwhile, Alan's ex-wife, Maria, was also dealing with the aftermath of their difficult divorce. Her father was going through a similar experience. Despite their separation, Maria couldn't shake off her loneliness and still considered Alan the only man in her life. She decided to seek professional help and visited a therapist. However, the psychiatrist who had been helping Alan recover explained that due to ethical reasons, he couldn't counsel both spouses. He recommended that Maria seek guidance from a different therapist, Alejandra. However, it's notable that Alejandra's relationship with Maria wasn't transparent, as she didn't disclose that her father was involved. Alejandra soon realized Alan could be a suitable match. Alan was described as a pleasant and wealthy man in his prime. Without hesitation, Alejandra asked Maria to bring Alan in for another session. According to Alejandra, she could resolve their issues in a single session. During the session, Alejandra and her father put their plan to seduce the Alan into action. It didn't take long to get results. Immediately after the session, Alan asked Alejandra out for coffee to discuss family issues. Initially, she declined, citing medical ethics, but they went on a date that same evening. A romantic affair quickly developed between them. However, Maria soon discovered their relationship and was shocked. She considered reporting Alejandra to the Medical Ethics Committee but decided against it. As a skilled therapist, Alejandra convinced Maria to let the situation go, attributing Maria's concerns to jealousy and an unwillingness to move on from her ex-husband. According to Alejandra, holding on to these feelings would prevent a happy future. Maria chose not to attend therapy sessions with Alan after they ended. Around the same time, Alan's relationship with Alejandra progressed quickly. Within a few months of meeting, they moved in together. 2 months later, they decided to get married, but Alan was unaware of Alejandra's past issues and the reasons for her previous divorce. In April 2014, Alan visited his parents and took the opportunity to discuss his upcoming wedding. His parents were surprised to learn about the wedding and his partner, Alejandra, as they had never heard of her before. The marriage was registered a week after Alan met with his parents. Notably, Alejandra asked Alan not to invite her friends and family to the wedding, citing a modest budget as the reason. However, her father did attend the ceremony. At first, their life seemed like a dream come true. They were young, happy, and had many plans and aspirations. However, this didn't last long. Alejandra's volatile temperament soon became apparent. The relationship between them began to deteriorate rapidly. Alan was a private person who kept his personal life to himself, even from friends. As a result, few people knew what was happening behind closed doors. However, it was clear that the relationship was strained, and they no longer appeared happy. After marrying Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. When his parents weren't invited to the wedding, leading to a complete breakdown in communication. Alan's friends noticed that his wife was becoming increasingly anxious and short-tempered, often behaving inappropriately. After a few embarrassing incidents, Alan became ashamed and started to limit their social interactions. Their arguments became a daily occurrence, often with no apparent reason or justification. Alejandra discovered her husband Alan's infidelity by snooping through his phone one evening. The racy messages from other women were the final straw. She claimed that when she confronted him about his cheating, he became violent, insulting, and humiliating. Feeling that the marriage was beyond repair, Alejandra decided to take drastic action. Instead of seeking therapy or counseling, she turned to a more sinister solution. Her focus shifted to devising the perfect plan to murder Alan. Alan, oblivious to his wife's intentions, continued his daily routine. He remained distant from his family, only making an effort to attend the annual family gathering to celebrate his grandfather's birthday. Alan attended the feast, but his parents made it clear that his wife, Alejandra, was not a welcome guest in their home. This snub infuriated Alejandra and further strained the relationship. Little did they know, this would be the last time the family saw Alan alive. On October 31, 2014, Alan sent a text message to his family, saying he had arrived home safely after his birthday party. However, he hasn't been in touch since then, and his absence from work for several days was unusual, as he was always responsible and diligent about his job. With the launch of a new business venture approaching, Alan's presence was crucial. But Alejandra had a sinister plan, which she set in motion after Alan returned from his birthday celebration. The couple had another argument, and Alejandra decided to eliminate her husband. Alejandra spiked his milk with a powerful sleeping pill, which Alan typically drank before bed, and then smothered him with a pillow. Alejandra took pleasure in watching her husband struggle to regain consciousness, pathetically trying to remove the pillow and take a breath. The most challenging part, however, was disposing of the body, a task she hadn't had time to plan for. Alejandra was in a desperate situation, as her husband Alan was too heavy for her to move on her own. With time running out, she rushed to her neighbor's vegetable garden to borrow an electric saw. She used the saw to cut Alan's body into pieces. This behavior seemed like something only a true sadist could accomplish. After dismembering the body, Alejandra packed the parts into garbage bags, taking the precaution of cutting off fingers and pulling teeth to hinder identification if the body was discovered. She stuffed the bags into suitcases to make it easier to remove the remains from the house without arousing suspicion. However, her plan was foiled as dawn approached. Alejandra struggled to leave the house with the heavy suitcases unnoticed. An elderly neighbor, who was awake due to insomnia, watched from her window and grew concerned about Alejandra's early and suspicious departure. It seemed strange that her husband wasn't helping her with the heavy luggage, and Alejandra's constant glancing around only added to the neighbor's unease. At dawn, Alejandra returned home, surprising her vigilant neighbor even more than before. It was later discovered that she had dispersed bags containing her ex-husband's remains across different neighborhoods to conceal her actions. As a new day began, she resumed her daily routine. On November 6, 2014, Mexican police made a gruesome discovery, a human torso with no teeth and no fingers. The entire police force was alerted due to the extreme brutality of the incident. Within a day, additional body parts were found in various locations throughout the city. Notably, the distance between the locations where the body parts were found was substantial. This would later be linked to Alejandra's prolonged absence from home. All the discovered body parts were sent to a leading forensic laboratory, where experts promptly confirmed that they belonged to the same individual. To avoid raising suspicions, Alejandra sent messages to Alan's relatives, claiming they were going on vacation and would be unreachable. Unbeknownst to her, Alan had recently distanced himself from his family and wasn't in contact with them. However, Alejandra's plan was foiled when her father, Alberto, called Alan's father's house to inquire about Alejandra's whereabouts. Alberto was concerned because he hadn't heard from her in a while, and her patients were worried about missing their counseling sessions. Later, Alberto called Alan's relatives again, informing them that Alejandra had been found and forcibly admitted to a clinic due to depression caused by her husband's infidelity. This alarming news prompted Alan's relatives to try and locate him, but they were unsuccessful. As a result, Alan's family sought police assistance. Forensic experts compared the remains of a recently discovered corpse with Alan's characteristics and confirmed a 100% match. Alan's relatives also identified the body, which was especially distressing for his grandfather. Shortly after the identification, his grandfather fell ill with heart disease and lost. The investigation led to a search warrant for Allen's home and office, where a patch of freshly dug earth was found in the backyard. Upon further digging, fingers and teeth were discovered. Alejandra was immediately apprehended, and traces of blood were found in one of the rooms, on the car trunk, and in the garage. Initially, Alejandra denied her guilt, hoping to escape punishment as she had with her previous husband's case. However, the investigation quickly resolved the case, aided by the testimony of an elderly witness whose account matched Allen's estimated time of death. Alejandra had used her position to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a medication only accessible to doctors. This new evidence further implicated her in the case, establishing a link between Alejandra and the brutal murder of her husband. CCTV cameras played a crucial role in tracing Allen's movements, confirming that he entered the house but never left. The footage also showed that suitcases were removed from the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict, sentencing Alejandra to life imprisonment for murder with brutality, attempted concealment of the crime, and abuse of her official position. Despite her father's efforts to use his connections and bribes to spare Alejandra from imprisonment, he was ultimately unsuccessful. However, he did manage to have the trial closed to the public and press, thereby minimizing further publicity. However, his actions were ultimately driven by self-interest and a desire to advance his career. As a result, his reputation as a specialist has been severely damaged, and it is unlikely that anyone will seek his expertise again. This is largely due to his failure to recognize the problems with his own daughter and the fact that he raised her to be a ruthless and calculating individual. The trial also brought to light the case of Alejandra's first husband, whose death had occurred under suspicious circumstances. Although the passage of time had made it difficult to gather evidence, there were suspicions that Alejandra's father may have been involved in the incident. Some even speculated that he had colluded with his daughter and that their actions had been motivated by a twisted scientific interest. Despite these suspicions, no concrete evidence was found to support this theory. Following numerous appeals from the victims' families, the sentence was ultimately increased to death. This was a highly unusual outcome, as such sentences are extremely rare in Mexico, particularly in modern times. Alejandra has been denied the opportunity to appeal the case, and her property, including their house, will be transferred to Allen's family. However, this offers little comfort, as the loss of a loved one can never be fully compensated. It has become clear that Alejandra was a pragmatic and cruel individual with significant mental health issues, despite medical examinations initially suggesting that she was sane. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ada Betty Cuadros Fernandez. Ada Cuadros was born on September 13, 1977, in the coastal town of Chimote, Peru, to Victor Cuadros, a veterinarian, and El Fernandez, a teacher. As the eldest of 4 siblings, Ada consistently excelled academically, winning knowledge contests and enjoying a happy childhood. Growing up, Ada spent a lot of time with one of her sisters on their grandparents' farm, developing a strong connection with nature and animals. This period was one of the happiest times of her life. Ada's family was middle class, not poor, but not wealthy either. During her teenage years, she sought ways to contribute financially, forming an entertainment group with her sister and a friend to perform at children's parties. After high school, Ada enrolled in a private university to study law, but unfortunately, her family's financial situation made it impossible for her to continue, and she was forced to drop out. Despite this setback, Ada was determined to succeed and support her family. With the goal of building a better life in mind, Ada applied for a US visa through the lottery program. Like many young people from Peru and Latin American countries, Ada viewed the United States as a land of unlimited opportunities. She was determined to migrate, work hard, earn a better income, and create a brighter future for herself and her family. Her family was overjoyed for her and sold some of their belongings to gather enough money for her journey. Her initial destination was Texas, where she planned to stay with some relatives. In early 2004, Ada started working as a waitress at a restaurant. Later, she found employment with a company that placed nannies in households, which is how she met the Lazarchik family. The family consisted of Michael, commonly known as Mike, his wife Renee, and their 3 children, Elisa, and twin boys Ryan and Kyle. Little is known about the family's background, except that Mike and Renee got married in 2000, and shortly after, Renee became pregnant with their first child, Elisa. 4 months after Elisa's birth, Renee was expecting again, this time with twins Kyle and Ryan. The Lazarchik couple was searching for a reliable nanny to care for their twins when Renee returned to work. Since Elisa was already settled in a daycare where she attended daily and had made friends, they decided to keep her there. After interviewing several candidates, they found Ada to be the most suitable. At 27, Ada was young yet mature, appearing healthy, strong, well-mannered, and cheerful. Renee wanted Ada to start right away so she could spend a few weeks showing her the household routines, explaining where everything was, and outlining her expectations. This would also give Renee the opportunity to observe how Ada interacted with the young twins, who were just over a year old. The family had one non-negotiable condition. They required a commitment from Ada to stay with them for at least 18 months, which she agreed to. Initially, the agreement was that Ada would only spend her days at the Lazarchik household. But later on, they asked her to move in full-time, and she accepted. As a result, she only went back to her uncle's house on weekends. Everything seemed to be going well, and the Lazarchik family was more than satisfied with Ada's work and had grown to trust her completely. They had many happy memories, captured in photos, of Ada smiling and caring for the twins. However, the Lazarchik family's situation took a dramatic turn in the summer of 2005. Ada broke the news to them that her uncles were returning to Peru and then moving to Germany, and she intended to go with them, having already bought her plane ticket for October 29th. This was a blow to the couple, as it was not what they had originally agreed upon. Eventually, they came to terms with it and only asked Ada to stay on until they could find a suitable replacement. They even asked for her help in finding and selecting her successor, and Ada agreed to assist them. After Ada stopped sleeping over at the Lazarchiks, she would go back to her uncle's house every night and return early the next morning. With her departure approaching, the Lazarchiks arranged to meet several potential nannies on Wednesday, October 12th. During the day, Renee asked Ada to prepare macaroni and cheese for the children, which Ada did. After feeding the kids, Ada waited for Renee's return. When Renee got back home, she greeted her children, making sure they were doing fine. After conducting some interviews, she spent over an hour with her kids before putting them to bed. Everything appeared normal. However, at exactly 5 a.m. on Thursday, October 13th, Kyle woke up crying, which was unusual since the twins were heavy sleepers who never woke up on their own. Renee got up, went to their room, comforted Kyle until he fell asleep again, and then returned to bed. At 7:30, 2 hours later, Mike entered the children's room, roused them from sleep, gave them a hug and a kiss, and left them in Ada's care before departing for work. Just before 9:30, Renee awoke, spent time with the twins, changed Ryan's diaper, bid farewell to both Ryan and Kyle, and then headed to work. Throughout this period, the children were doing fine, with the only unusual occurrence being Kyle's early awakening that day. Elisa, their older sister, went to daycare as usual, but around 1 p.m., Ada's 911 call marked a dramatic turn of events. In a highly agitated state, Ada reported that Kyle, one of the children, had stopped breathing and was turning blue. After providing the address, the operator guided Ada through performing CPR on Kyle, while paramedics rushed to the scene. Minutes later, paramedics arrived and took charge of Kyle's care. They questioned Ada, who was very distressed about what had happened. Ada explained that after lunch, she had put Kyle to bed in his crib and left to fetch his brother Ryan. When she returned with Ryan, Kyle suddenly began vomiting and stopped breathing. While paramedics treated Kyle, Ada phoned Renee to update her on the situation, providing a modified account of what had happened. According to Ada, after feeding the children, she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor, as was her usual practice, before going to fetch his brother. However, when she returned, she found Kyle vomiting. She went to the kitchen to grab a bowl to contain the vomit, and upon her return, she discovered that Kyle had fallen. Ada claimed she picked him up, took him to the sink, and performed the breathing rescue technique Renee had taught her, but it didn't work. She also attempted CPR. Following initial treatment, the paramedics rushed Kyle to the nearest hospital. By the time Renee arrived at the house, the ambulance carrying her son had already departed, but the police remained on the scene. Renee took Ryan, the other twin, and asked Ada to accompany them. They followed the police, who escorted them to the hospital. During the drive, Renee called her husband and they met at the medical center. Shortly after, the doctors decided to airlift Kyle to the Dallas Children's Hospital via helicopter. The Lazachikics returned home, leaving Ada to care for Ryan, before heading to the Dallas Children's Hospital. Ada requested they keep her updated about Kyle's condition. Renee worried Ada might be too nervous to care for Ryan, so she called a friend to help at the house. Her friend arrived to find Ada upset, tearful, and concerned about Kyle's fall. Ada explained that Kyle suddenly fell, and she tried to revive him with CPR. She repeatedly expressed her love for Kyle, insisting she'd never harm him. At the Dallas Children's Hospital, the Lazachik family received devastating news about Kyle's condition. The doctor in charge reported that Kyle had suffered severe head injuries, including multiple bruises on his head, arm, and left shoulder. A neurosurgeon explained to Mike and Renee that urgent action was needed to relieve the pressure on Kyle's brain, but sadly, his survival was unlikely. A child abuse specialist also met with the parents and suggested that Kyle's injuries were consistent with abuse. The specialist emphasized that the injuries were extremely severe, equivalent to those sustained in a severe car accident or a fall from a 6th-floor height. Renee was stunned when she heard the news. At first, she suspected that Ada might have accidentally dropped the child or was too scared or ashamed to admit it. But the doctors clearly explained the severity of Kyle's head injuries, which required a significant amount of force to inflict. This made an accident seem highly unlikely. Renee quickly arranged for another friend to pick up her son, Brian, and take him away from the house. While this was happening at the hospital, Ada became increasingly agitated at home, repeatedly calling Renee's friend to ask about Kyle's condition. When Renee's friend stepped out to pick up her son from school, Ada called her multiple times, inquiring about Kyle. However, when Renee's friend returned to the house, Ada appeared calm, no longer crying or talking. Just then, a police car drove by the house. Upon seeing it, Ada became hysterical, crying uncontrollably and shouting, "No, no, no." She collapsed behind a door, repeatedly insisting that she would never harm Kyle. 2 female detectives arrived to question Ada, as she was the only adult present when the incident occurred, and had called 911 to report the injured child. As the detectives arrived at the house, they heard Ada's cries and got out of their patrol car. Inside, they found Ada extremely agitated. Once she calmed down, she explained that she had removed Kyle from his high chair and placed him on the playroom floor to help him burp after a meal. When Kyle started vomiting, Ada went to the kitchen to get a container to catch the vomit, as Renee disliked stains on the floor. While she was away, Kyle turned blue, fell, and started convulsing. Ada claimed she then took him to the living room, called 911, and followed the dispatcher's instructions. During the interview, the other officer called the hospital to get an update on Kyle's condition. Upon learning the diagnosis, the detectives told Ada that her story didn't add up, given Kyle's injuries. Ada suggested that Kyle might have hit his head when he fell on the playroom floor after she left him alone, but the officers noted that the floor was covered with soft rugs, making this explanation unlikely. Ada then proposed that Kyle might have hit his head on the doorframe when she carried him on her hip. At the officer's request, Ada demonstrated how this could have happened, adding that Mike and Renee often bumped Kyle's head without any issues. The officer checked the spot where Ada claimed Kyle hit his head, but found no signs of a strong impact. When Ada was questioned by the officers, she claimed the injury to her son Kyle was a result of a strong impact when she was running with him in her arms. She denied ever shaking or hitting him or his twin. However, the officers remained skeptical, as the injury seemed inconsistent with Ada's story. They urged her to come clean, explaining that the truth could be crucial in saving Kyle's life. Despite their pleas, Ada refused to provide any further explanation. The officers reported the situation to their command and took Ada into custody for further questioning. Meanwhile, crime scene investigators arrived to process the house. After completing their work, they gave Renee's friend, who was staying at the house, the all clear to clean and organize the property in preparation for the family's return. As Renee's friend and several others cleaned the house, they stumbled upon a piece of adhesive tape sticking out from a cabinet door under the kitchen island. When they opened the door, they noticed it was broken and held together by tape, causing it to become misaligned. They simply resecured it with the tape, but found it odd, as Renee was always meticulous about fixing broken items to prevent her children from getting hurt. Their curiosity piqued. They decided to report the discovery to the police. Shortly after, investigators returned to the scene to collect potential evidence. Later, when questioned about the cabinet door, Renee stated that she frequently used that door and had never seen it being held shut with adhesive tape before. By Friday, October 14th, all of Mike and Renee's hopes had been dashed. The doctors informed them that Kyle was clinically brain dead and had no chance of recovery. Amidst overwhelming grief and indescribable pain, the couple made the difficult decision to authorize the removal of life support. After which, Kyle sadly passed away 3 days later, on October 17th. The detectives questioned Ada, who was in prison on suspicion of premeditated assault on a minor. Ada claimed that on the day before the incident, she was preparing macaroni and cheese at Renee's request. According to Ada, Kyle was sitting on the kitchen counter, fell off, and hit his head hard on the kitchen floor. She picked him up, checked for injuries, and found only redness on his ear and the right side of his head. Ada applied cold compresses and gave him a pain reliever. When asked why she hadn't shared this with the other officers, Ada said she thought they wouldn't believe her. She didn't tell Renee because Renee had a severe headache when she got home from work and requested the lights be turned off and the house be kept quiet due to her migraines. The detectives asked if Ada had fallen with the child, which she strongly denied. During the interrogation, Ada discovered that Kyle had died and broke down in tears for the rest of the interview. The judge charged Ada with aggravated homicide and set bail at $715, an amount neither Ada nor her family could afford, so she remained in custody until the trial. The police hinted that they might charge her with premeditated actions, which could carry the death penalty. The 2005 trial of Kyle's death case heard testimony from the doctor who examined Kyle at Dallas Children's Hospital. The doctor reported that when Kyle arrived, he was already unconscious. Multiple bruises were found on the right side of his head, as well as on the left side of his head, shoulder, and both arms. 2 small hemorrhages forming hematomas were also discovered on the right temple. The doctor identified 3 main areas of hematomas on Kyle's head, indicating 3 separate impacts. The bruises were relatively recent, with one possibly 12 to 16 hours old. Internally, Kyle suffered from brain and retinal bleeding, consistent with severe trauma, and despite no broken bones, his brain tissue was significantly swollen, with an increased head pressure of 90 millimeters of mercury, far exceeding the normal 20 millimeters. Based on these findings, the doctor concluded that Kyle's injuries were consistent with severe blunt force trauma, likely caused by hitting his head against a hard object. The doctors suggested that such injuries could result from violently shaking and swinging a young child's head against a solid object, such as a kitchen cabinet door. A forensic expert from Dallas County testified about the autopsy results, which revealed multiple overlapping small bruises on Kyle's scalp, as well as a couple of small scrapes on his right temple, spaced over a centimeter apart. The autopsy also showed 4 or 5 pairs of similar injuries on his head. The brain had suffered significant bleeding and swelling, with bleeding in the retinas of both eyes, indicating that a substantial amount of force was required to cause such injuries. The expert concluded that Kyle's death was a result of severe head injuries caused by blunt force trauma, and agreed that it was possible that Kyle's head had been struck multiple times against the wooden door of the kitchen cabinet. The expert discounted the possibility that Kyle's injuries were caused by simply bumping into a door frame or falling from the kitchen counter. A forensic analyst provided crucial testimony, measuring the distance between the fasteners on the broken kitchen cabinet door and finding it consistent with the punctate abrasions on Kyle's head. This expert also examined the adhesive tape used to repair the cabinet door, uncovering 2 DNA traces. One of these traces had a significantly higher contribution and matched A's DNA, while the lesser trace remained unidentified. Next, Mike took the stand to testify. He recalled that Kyle was unharmed on the night of October 12th and the morning of October 13th, displaying no bruises. Mike explained that he had prepared breakfast that morning, opening and closing the kitchen cabinet doors to retrieve utensils and food, and verified that all doors were in perfect condition at the time, including the one that was later mysteriously repaired with tape. The parents shared that they had breakfast with the children and engaged in playful activities with the twins, who were crawling around a playhouse. Based on all the evidence, it's clear that Ada was the only adult in the house when the events leading to Kyle's death occurred. While the exact circumstances may never be known for certain, the prosecutor presented a possible scenario at trial. Kyle might have refused to eat his lunch, prompting Ada, who was distracted by watching a soap opera, to remove him from his high chair without noticing the open cabinet door. The prosecutor suggested that Ada's frustration or anger may have led her to attack Kyle's head with the cabinet door, which ultimately broke, leaving screw marks on the child. After all the testimonies and closing arguments, the jury went to deliberate. Upon returning, they found a Quadros guilty of capital murder of a child under 6 years old. As the verdict was read, Ada's mother, Elle Fernandez, who had traveled from Peru when her daughter was arrested, stood up and shouted that she would free because she was innocent. She proclaimed that there was no evidence to convict her daughter and vowed to start over an appeal. Kyle's parents shared photos and videos of their 14-month-old son, recounting his life from birth to days before his death. Family members spoke, while others cried. Sentenced to life without parole in 2006, Ada's family refused to give up, citing racial prejudice and poor defense. They sought appeal funding from Peru, U.S. communities, and solidarity groups. In prison, Ada consistently proclaimed her innocence and seized every opportunity to reiterate it in interviews. Her persistence eventually paid off when, in 2009, her lawyers filed an appeal, highlighting 5 specific mistakes made during the initial trial. The appeals court reviewed the case and dismissed 3 of the claims, but upheld 2. This was sufficient for the judges to quash the conviction and declare the trial null and void due to irregularities. In the aftermath of this ruling, Ada's family launched a new fundraising campaign to raise the $100,000 required to cover the costs of a new trial. It took 3 more years to prepare for the new trial, which finally began on July 10, 2012. The jury selection process started with over 100 candidates, and eventually, 12 jurors were chosen. The trial was held at Collin County's Justice Hall. The defense team argued that Kyle's head injury occurred on October 12th, when he fell from the kitchen counter. They claimed that the situation worsened the following day, when Ada accidentally hit Kyle's head on the door frame while carrying him in her arms. This time around, the defense presented a new piece of evidence. Testimony from a forensic expert with 40 years of experience. The expert suggested that some of Kyle's bruises might have been caused during his hospital stay, specifically when doctors inserted a catheter to assess brain swelling. However, the prosecution strongly disputed this new testimony. Additionally, David Gardner, an employee of the kitchen cabinet manufacturer, testified for the defense. He proposed alternative explanations for the broken cabinet door, although he didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kyle's head could have been struck against it. A pivotal moment in the trial came when Mike took the stand, recounting the heartbreaking final 2 days of Kyle's life. Mike described how Kyle was hooked up to multiple tubes and machines, and ultimately being removed from life support, with his parents by his side as he passed away. The defense team insisted that there wasn't sufficient evidence to convict Ada, but the prosecution countered by emphasizing the medical findings and the numerous inconsistencies in Ada's story. Following the conclusion of the trial, the jury deliberated for 5 hours, even requesting to review the 911 call recordings once more. In the end, they delivered a verdict. Ada Quadros, aged 33 at the time, was guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In prison, Ada occupied herself by joining the volleyball team, learning Braille, and entering an art competition in which she won with a portrait of the Virgin Mary. She sold her winning artwork to raise money for a new appeal. Despite being behind bars, Ada remains adamant that she is innocent, and her spirit remains unbroken. From her cell, she and her family persist in their efforts to secure an appeal, hoping to prove what they believe to be the truth. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Natalee Holloway. 18-year-old Natalee Holloway, who disappeared while on a trip to Aruba, an island in the southern Caribbean Sea near Venezuela. In May 2005, a group of 124 students from Mountain Brook High School, accompanied by 7 chaperones, traveled to Aruba to celebrate the start of their adult lives. The students stayed at the Holiday Inn and had access to beaches, palm trees, restaurants, and local entertainment venues. They spent 5 unforgettable days on the island, enjoying themselves with swimming, sunbathing, dancing, and partying. However, on the day of their return, Natalee Holloway was nowhere to be found. Her belongings, phone, and passport were still in the hotel, but she had vanished. Her mother, Elizabeth Twitty, was the first to raise the alarm and reported her concerns to one of the chaperones. Elizabeth recalled that at that moment, her heart sensed something was wrong, as her daughter was obedient and always stayed in touch. Natalee's mother and stepfather immediately flew to Aruba to search for her. Upon arriving, Elizabeth was able to find out more information than the police did, as the authorities seemed uninterested in starting a search. The police told Elizabeth that cases like this are not rare, and that people often miss their planes or get lost in bars or with new acquaintances. However, Elizabeth knew her daughter and was convinced that something was seriously wrong. Natalee Holloway was last seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's nightclub with 17-year-old Jan, a local regular, who had offered her a drink. They left with 2 other young men in a silver Honda car. 4 hours later, Natalee's mother, Elizabeth, contacted the police again with concerning information, leading to the detention of the trio. Initially, Vander Slot denied knowing Natalee, but later admitted to leaving the bar with her. They drove around, visited the beach, and then dropped her off near the hotel. His friends, Deepak and SES Kalpo, confirmed his account. Natalee was born on October 21, 1986, in Clinton, Mississippi, to Elizabeth Ann and David Edward Holloway. Her parents loved each other dearly, but divorced after 13 years. Natalee and her brother stayed with their mother, but their father remained supportive emotionally and financially. In 2000, Elizabeth remarried to George Twitty, and Natalie moved to Mountain Brook. The move was smooth, and she made new friends easily due to her sociable nature. Her family was devout, attending church every Sunday, which influenced Natalie's upbringing. Relatives remembered her as kind, modest, and beautiful, with a radiant smile. Natalie was an excellent student, engaged in dance, and participated in various clubs. She dreamed of pursuing a career in medicine and had chosen a local university for a substantial scholarship. At the time, she had promising life prospects and was excited about an upcoming trip. Elizabeth believed her daughter was unlikely to trust a stranger or get into a car with him. Surveillance footage from the bar confirmed her suspicions, showing Natalie's behavior changed after drinking a beverage offered by Jan, suggesting she was under the influence of some substance. The staff at Carlos and Charlie spoke well of Natalie, but Vander Slot had a questionable reputation, often behaving poorly, indulging in gambling, and consuming forbidden substances. He had previously recorded and uploaded videos of his exploits to the internet, but was never held accountable due to his father's influence as a well-known lawyer aiming for a judgeship. The disappearance of Natalie sparked a nationwide search, with the island authorities launching an extensive operation to find her. Volunteers, divers, and specially trained dogs were deployed to cover a vast area. The government even declared a public holiday, and 50 Marines combed the coastline. An airplane equipped with thermal imaging scanned over 40 kilometers of terrain, but Natalie seemed to have vanished into thin air. On June 30th, investigators discovered that there was no footage of Natalie entering a building, which contradicted the statements of Jan and the Calpo brothers. The police brought them in for questioning again, and this time, the younger Vander Slot unexpectedly changed his story. He claimed to have dropped Natalie off at a location without surveillance, not near the hotel, and added that he saw a figure in black moving towards her. Hotel security staff who were on duty that night were detained, with investigators suspecting they might have intercepted Natalie on her way. On June 9th, detectives arrested the suspicious trio, and one of the security guards shared a cell with the Calpo brothers. The guard learned a crucial detail. Sadish confessed that he and Deepak had lied to cover for their friend, leaving Jan alone with Natalie on the beach. The security guards were released on June 13th, and on June 17th, another suspect, Steve Gregory Cruz, a DJ, was detained. The police suspected his involvement in Natalie's disappearance. On June 22nd, Paulus Vander Slot was brought in for questioning and detained, but he was released on June 26th due to insufficient evidence. Jan offered a third explanation of the events, trying to shift the blame onto the Calpo brothers, claiming he parted ways with Natalie near his home, and she left with them. However, his story was not taken seriously. A lawyer defended Sadish and Deepak, and on July 4th, after a brief trial, the Calpo brothers were released. Jan Vander Slot, born on August 6, 1987, in Arnhem, Netherlands, was one of 3 brothers in a large family. He was a good student, excelled in sports, and planned to attend St. Leo University in Florida. Jan's childhood was marked by a strained relationship with his mother, Anita, an art teacher, who considered him an incubator liar. He grew up rebellious, often ran away from home, and fell in with a bad crowd, developing a penchant for gambling. Despite this, he presented himself as cool and fearless to his friends. Locals were suspicious of Jan's lenient attitude, fearing it would lead to trouble. However, he was popular among girls and often took advantage of them. As the investigation into the suspects continued, the search for Natalie persisted. U.S. authorities closely monitored the progress and provided substantial financial support. Despite the scrutiny, the Holloway family was desperate to find their daughter alive and announced a monetary reward, which initially started at $50,000. As hope dwindled, the reward increased to $1 million. Additionally, $100,000 was offered for information leading to the location of her remains, which later increased to $250,000. During this time, the investigation hit several dead ends. However, After the reward announcement, new witnesses emerged. One claimed to have seen Jan with the Culpo brothers at a local night spot between 2:30 and 3 a.m. Another witness claimed to have seen several suspicious men hiding a woman's body at a dump on the afternoon of May 30th. However, these statements led the investigation astray, and after numerous checks, their claims were not corroborated. On August 26th, the police detained the Culpo brothers and another young man, but these actions were unrelated to the case. The arrest was more about intimidation and an attempt to get them to talk. Ultimately, on September 3, 2005, all four were released on bail. A week and a half later, the court removed all restrictions and prohibitions, as none provided any substantial leads to the investigation. Jan van der Sloot was detained for 3 months, but after his release, he sought to capitalize on his notoriety by giving interviews and appearing on TV shows. In these appearances, he claimed that Natalie Holloway had flirted with him and offered to have sex. But he declined because he didn't have a condom. However, during one show, he became aggressive and threw a glass at the interviewer. A journalist who was targeted by Jan's glass-throwing incident held a grudge against him and worked with authorities to place a bug in a friend's car. The bug captured Jan confessing to witnessing Natalie's death. He claimed that they had sex on the beach, but afterward, she began shaking, lost consciousness, and eventually died. Jan and a friend then disposed of her body at sea. Despite this confession, Jan managed to avoid consequences by denying the statement on another TV show, claiming he had only told his friend what he wanted to hear. In 2007, Jan released a book, The Case of Natalie Holloway, My Own Account of Her Disappearance in Aruba, in which he presented his side of the story and apologized to Natalie's family. By this time, the official investigation had largely stalled. In 2008, 2 new witnesses came forward. The first reported seeing Jan and his father on the beach around 4 a.m. on the night Natalie went missing. The younger van der Sloot appeared disheveled, and the witness saw him arguing with his father in a car before they drove away. However, Paulus van der Sloot had an alibi for the night in question. The second witness was Jan's former girlfriend, who recalled that Jan had once made a suspicious comment about being able to dispose of someone's body. However, this was not considered a strong lead, given Jan's history of lying and exaggeration. Jan and the Culpo brothers were detained multiple times, but released due to lack of evidence. The Holloway family hired a private investigator who, along with Natalie's father, conducted their own investigation, interviewing locals and searching the landfill. During this time, they uncovered several oversights by the local police, including failure to interview Natalie's classmates or hotel room neighbors. It was also discovered that someone had used Natalie's hotel key several times on the night of her disappearance, and that her mobile phone and toothbrush had been left behind. A male DNA was found on her toothbrush. The investigation ultimately revealed that the Aruban authorities had been negligent in their handling of the case. Jan's father, Paulus, died of a heart attack in 2010, reportedly due to the stress and shame of his son's actions. After his father's death, Jan attempted to blackmail the Holloway family, offering to reveal the truth for $250,000. The family agreed to meet with him and paid an advance of $25,000. During the meeting, Jan provided yet another version of events, claiming that Natalie had resisted his advances, which enraged him, and that he had pushed her, causing her to hit her head and lose consciousness. He then buried her body in a building foundation. However, the police investigation revealed that Jan's claims were false, as the house he pointed to had long been built, and its foundation was fully set at the time of Natalie's disappearance. Jan fled to Peru with the money, but unfortunately, the consequences did not catch up with him immediately. On June 1, 2010, the body of 21-year-old Stephanie Flores Ramirez was discovered in a hotel room in Lima, Peru. She had been severely beaten, and the cause of her death was determined to be a neck fracture. Surveillance cameras quickly helped identify the criminal, and soon after, Jan was arrested and taken to the police station. He explained that he had met Stephanie at a casino, and after playing poker, they decided to continue their acquaintance in his hotel room. However, when Stephanie accessed his laptop and discovered his connection to Natalie Holloway's death, she became frightened and wanted to leave. Jan realized what had alarmed her, became enraged, and struck her until she died. Jan was captured on his way to Chile and confessed to the crime on the 4th day of his arrest. The news shocked residents in the US, especially as it occurred exactly 5 years after Natalie's disappearance. Elizabeth Twitty expressed her grief, noting that justice had finally been served, albeit at the cost of another life. Jan was sentenced to 28 years in prison on January 11, 2012, for the premeditated crime against Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in compensation to the Ramirez family. In 2014, Jan was transferred from Pedras Gordas prison to Chalet Pala prison, where he met a Peruvian woman who visited another inmate in 2010. They got married, but it turned out Jan was using her for his own purposes. He showed no signs of remorse or guilt for his actions. Meanwhile, in June 2011, David Holloway filed a petition in an Alabama court to have his daughter Natalie, who had gone missing in 2005, declared legally deceased. Natalie's mother opposed this, hoping that Jan would confess to the crime and face trial. After a hearing, Judge Alan King ruled in favor of the declaration on January 12, 2012. On June 8, 2023, Jan was extradited to the United States and placed in Hoover City Jail in Alabama. The next day, he was charged with extortion and wire fraud, but he pleaded not guilty. However, on October 18, 2023, he entered a plea agreement admitting to murdering Natalie Holloway. He confessed to fatally bludgeoning her with a cinder block on May 30, 2005, and disposing of her body in the ocean for sharks to consume. Unfortunately, the confession made as part of the plea deal could not be used in court. Jan was sentenced to 20 years, which would run concurrently with his prison term in Peru. Natalie Holloway's disappearance remains one of the most notorious missing person cases in the US, and it is still an open case in Aruba. A series of cover-ups, corrupt deals, and bureaucratic delays effectively allowed the murder of an innocent young woman to go unpunished, despite global attention to the investigation. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Gabriela Alcaino. Gabriela Alcaino was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, Chile, to Federico Alcaino and Carolina Donoso Campos. She was their only child and the first grandchild in a large, loving family. Her uncle Rodrigo became her godfather and was very close to her, just like her grandfather Carlos, who cherished her. Gabriela grew up in a middle-class family that valued education and provided her with a good upbringing, despite not being wealthy. When Gabriela was just 5 years old, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a kind, friendly, and open child who was a bit shy and modest, but she made friends easily and got along with her peers. She had a lovely appearance that earned her admiration and delight from everyone around her. Gabriela excelled in school, loved music, dancing, and drawing, and her parents encouraged her talents. She enjoyed spending time with her younger brothers at her father's house, which was nearby. And overall, her childhood was a happy and carefree time surrounded by loving family members. At 15, Gabriela fell in love for the first time with Fabian, a fellow student at her school who was only a year older. They started out as a happy couple, walking hand in hand, eating ice cream and stealing kisses. Fabian came from a good family, and his parents were well respected and wanted the best for him. However, Fabian himself was quiet and secretive, avoiding eye contact and preferring not to talk to others. This led many to assume he was shy, but it's likely he struggled with social anxiety. When Gabriella introduced Fabian to her father, he approved of her choice, seeing Fabian as calm, responsible, and rational. The father had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriella, and promising not to harm her or let others harm her. Fabian promised to do so. At first, their relationship was loving and calm, with Fabian genuinely trying to be attentive and caring. However, this peace didn't last. After a few months, Fabian's true nature emerged, and he became controlling and cruel. He tried to dictate every aspect of Gabriella's life, became jealous, and decided who she could and couldn't hang out with. He monitored her phone, demanding immediate responses to his calls and messages, and would throw tantrums if she didn't comply. For the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriella downplayed her boyfriend Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, thinking they were temporary and that he would eventually go back to being the kind and caring person she fell in love with. She tried to accommodate all his demands, hoping that his behavior would improve. However, Fabian only became more aggressive and volatile over time. He started to emotionally wear Gabriella down, and his abuse eventually escalated beyond verbal aggression. He would physically intimidate her, slapping her, pulling her hair, and grabbing her hands. Although these actions often left no visible marks, friends began to notice bruises on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. As Gabriella struggled to cope with the abuse, she became withdrawn and depressed. Her friends and family noticed the change in her, seeing the tears in her eyes and the sadness that had replaced her former smile. She started distancing herself from others, avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from speaking to. Gabriella repeatedly tried to have conversations with her boyfriend Fabian, but it was unsuccessful. She even broke up with him multiple times, only to be coerced back into the relationship by Fabian. This pattern of breakups, stalking, and threats continued for over a year. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. He was accused of abuse and assault, and faced possible jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school, forced to complete his education through homeschooling. After this event, Gabriella finally decided to end the toxic relationship for good. However, Fabian refused to accept it. He apologized, made empty promises to change, and begged her to take him back. When Gabriella rejected him, Fabian resorted to stalking, blackmail, and threats in an attempt to control her and maintain their relationship. Fabian stalked Gabriella at her school and home, even attempting to break into her bedroom through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, making constant threats and tearful apologies in an effort to control her. Despite his harassment, Gabriella remained firm in her decision to end the relationship. Fabian would occasionally vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had finally moved on. However, he would inevitably reappear, terrorizing her and refusing to leave her be. He followed her everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing disturbing scenes. As a result, Gabriella became terrified of being alone, always ensuring she was accompanied by friends or family. She would go to her mother's workplace after school, and they would head home together. When she needed to travel, she would ask her father or uncle to escort her. This ordeal continued for months, leaving Gabriella drained and exhausted, though she tried not to show it. A series of tragic events began in early 2018, when the Alcano family was devastated by a terrible crime. A burglar broke into Federico's home, where his second wife lived, and murdered her while the children were at school, and Federico was at work. The perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior criminal record, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother stepped in to support Federico and his children during this difficult time. This tragedy temporarily shifted Gabriella's attention away from Fabian, who had mysteriously disappeared around the same time. Meanwhile, Gabriella was also busy preparing for entrance exams, driven by her ambition to attend one of Santiago's top universities and pursue a career in journalism or advertising. The tragedy was only the beginning of a series of devastating events for the Alcaino family. By May 2018, Fabian, Gabriella's ex-boyfriend, began stalking her relentlessly. He would climb over her home's fence or show up at the supermarket or mall, making her feel unsafe everywhere she went. Gabriella was terrified and sent screenshots of threatening messages from Fabian to someone, pleading for help. She confessed her fear for herself and her loved ones, but chose not to tell her family about the stalking and threats, afraid of worrying them. On June 10, 2018, the Alcaino family gathered at Carlos's house to celebrate his 80th birthday. However, this joyful family event would ultimately be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening seemed happy and uneventful, filled with laughter, music, and a large family meal. Gabriella played with her younger brothers and cousins, but appeared troubled and distant. Her uncle Rodrigo noticed her distress and asked if everything was all right. But Gabriella just smiled sadly, shrugged, and said she was nervous without explaining why. Her uncle chose not to press the issue, thinking she would open up when ready, but later deeply regretted this decision. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriella on the forehead, told her he loved her, and assured her she could count on his support in any situation. Then he returned home with his younger children. This was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and his first wife alive. At around 4 a.m. on June 11th, Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, jumped over the fence of his ex-girlfriend Gabriella's house. He planned to sneak into her bedroom through the window and attack her. But just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on and the back door creaked open. Carolina, Gabriella's mother, had been awakened by the noise and was checking on the commotion. Fabian attacked her, pushing her back inside and stabbing her repeatedly. In total, he inflicted 36 stab wounds, mostly to her chest, neck, and head, leaving her with no chance of survival. Carolina managed to scream briefly, which woke up Gabriella, who rushed downstairs to investigate. As she descended, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and enraged. He grabbed her and dragged her down. Gabriella desperately tried to call emergency services on her phone, but Fabian stopped her. He then stabbed her in the chest, piercing her heart, which proved to be a fatal blow. Fabian moved Gabriella's body to the kitchen, where Carolina's lifeless body lay. He attempted to erase his traces by wiping fingerprints and cleaning bloody footprints. He then washed himself and the murder weapon in the bathroom. Finally, he quietly left the house around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. After Carolina failed to show up for work for 2 days and didn't answer her phone, her colleagues became worried. She was a responsible person and wouldn't just disappear without a reason. Her boss contacted Federico, her partner, to ask if he knew what was going on. Federico was shocked and tried calling Carolina, but her phone went unanswered. He also tried calling his daughter, Gabriella's phone, but it was turned off. He then called his brother Rodrigo, who hadn't seen or spoken to the two since Carlos's birthday party. Federico rushed to Carolina's house, which looked empty, but the car was still in the garage. He walked around the house, knocking on doors and peeking through windows, but he didn't want to go inside, even though he had a spare key. Instead, he called the police and asked them to check the house. When the police arrived, they wondered why Federico hadn't used his spare key to enter the house. Federico admitted he was afraid of what he might find inside. At 11 a.m., he finally opened the door and went in with the officers. That's when they discovered the bodies of Carolina and Gabriella on the kitchen floor. They had been dead for over a day. Federico was overwhelmed with grief and desperately called for an ambulance, pleading with someone to save his loved ones. However, the officers had to calm him down, and his agitated behavior raised suspicions. As a result, he was taken outside to a police car for further questioning. When Federico tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was being treated as the prime suspect in a double murder investigation. Rodrigo soon arrived at the scene and was shocked to find that his brother was being held by the police. He was devastated by the news of his niece's death and couldn't understand why there was no ambulance or any medical assistance being provided. Both Federico and Rodrigo were taken in for questioning, and their alibis were thoroughly investigated. Fortunately, they were eventually cleared of any wrongdoing, as it was established that they were with their family at the time of the crime. Further investigation revealed that Gabriella had been stalked by her ex-boyfriend, with friends providing evidence of threatening messages and voice recordings. Federico remembered the obsessed suitor his daughter had tried to break up with, but he never thought the seemingly harmless boy she had introduced to him was capable of such a horrific crime. The police investigation into Fabian Cesar, the young man, revealed that he had gotten rid of the murder weapon and thrown away clothes with bloodstains. Despite this, his shoes still had tiny blood drops on them, and the pattern on the soles matched prints found at the crime scene. Furthermore, 4 of Gabriella's classmates came forward to say they had heard Fabian threaten Gabriella, stating he would rather kill her than let her go. As the evidence and witness statements mounted, Fabian was forced to admit to the crime. However, he tried to present himself as a lovesick individual who had not meant to harm Gabriella, but rather just wanted to talk to her. He claimed that things got out of control, and he ended up dealing with her mother, who unfortunately became an unwanted witness. After completing the autopsies and necessary tests, the authorities returned the bodies of the victims to their families for burial. At the funeral, hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was buried in the white dress she had always wanted to wear, and Carolina's casket was closed due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired an experienced lawyer who built a strong defense, promising a reduced sentence during the preliminary hearings. The lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean criminal record, arguing that the dispute with his classmate had been resolved out of court. However, the victim's family demanded that Fabian be charged with femicide. The prosecution rejected this charge, as according to Chilean law, femicide only applies when the perpetrator and victim are spouses or live together, which was not the case for the 2 teenagers. Fabian's lawyer claimed that he had acted impulsively and under distress, which could lead to a potential 15-year sentence for double homicide and assault. The Allen family, understandably, wanted the harshest punishment for him. Following the initial court hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested that he be released pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious, having lost 3 women close to him to violent deaths. The lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights organizations, developed a proposal for Gabriella's law. This law would expand the definition of femicide to include cases where the victims were in romantic relationships with their killers, even if they weren't married or living together. The proposed bill faced opposition because it would mean that perpetrators already in prison for similar crimes could face new charges and lose their eligibility for early release. However, feminist organizations across the country supported the Alim family, staging marches and demonstrations in favor of Gabriella's law. In August 2019, Chile's government introduced amendments to its femicide law, over a year after the devastating murders. These amendments, known as Gabriella's law, included 15 key changes that were later approved by Congress. Under this new law, femicide is defined as any violent act, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to gender-based hatred, regardless of her relationship with the perpetrator. The law also considers additional circumstances, such as the victim being a minor or having health issues, to be aggravating factors. In April 2022, Fabian Ceres went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years prior. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had no grounds to challenge the charges. Fabian was subsequently convicted of femicide under aggravating circumstances, as one of the victims was a minor, and also of double homicide and assault. On April 20th, Fabian received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Michael Van Eck. Michael Van Eck was born on August 14, 1987, in a city that was once a hub for gold miners. He was the only brother to 4 sisters, Natasha, Michelle, Bianca, and Rihanna. Michael grew up in a close-knit family with caring and loving parents who worked hard to provide a decent life for their children. His father was an entrepreneur, and his mother created a nurturing atmosphere at home that encouraged the growth and development of their kids. Michael was a sociable and kind person who did well in school and sports. He even earned a black belt in karate, which gave him confidence and resilience. After completing his education, Michael trained as an electrician, a profession that offered good earnings and promising job prospects. He worked at mine number 4 of the Beatrix mine in the small town of Unison. In 2011, at the age of 23, Michael decided to register on a dating site to distract himself from a recent breakup and meet new people. That's when he came across the profile of a sweet and smiling girl who shared his interests. They both disliked loud parties and wanted to find true love and build a strong family. Michael was pleasantly surprised to have found a suitable match online. On April 2nd, he excitedly told his mother that he had a date and was busy preparing for it. He even withdrew 3,000 rand from his account to impress the girl. However, he was uneasy about the unusual meeting spot his friend had chosen, the city cemetery, and didn't mention it to his parents. At around 9 p.m. that evening, Michael said goodbye to his family and left the house, getting into his silver Peugeot 2007, a gift from his parents for his coming of age. When he arrived at the cemetery, the girl was running a bit late, but she looked stunning in a white dress and greeted him with a smile. They chatted comfortably, and she suggested they head to a more secluded area of the cemetery. There, they found a romantic setup, a blanket and a basket of fruit and wine. After having a glass of wine, the girl suddenly kissed Michael. But the pleasant feeling quickly turned to pain and horror as he realized he had fallen into a sinister trap. Chana Van Haren was born in 1991, a time of crisis for her parents. Her mother's pregnancy prompted the couple to put their divorce on hold and try to salvage their relationship. However, their efforts ultimately failed, and their home life continued to deteriorate. Chana's mother made no effort to hide her resentment towards her daughter, viewing her as an unwanted reminder of her husband. After the divorce, Chana's mother took the children and left their father behind. Chana suffered from a severe lack of love and attention from her mother, feeling lonely and misunderstood. Among her siblings, Chana struggled the most, growing increasingly withdrawn and sullen from a young age. She exhibited disturbing behaviors, such as talking about death and creating disturbing drawings. Her grandparents, alarmed by her behavior, suspected supernatural influence and took her to church, where she was subjected to an exorcism ritual. Chana's mental health declined as she got older. At 10, she had a disturbing incident where she threatened a house guest with a knife, prompting her family to seek professional psychiatric help. Fortunately, the medication improved her mood, and her father made an effort to spend quality time with her, even taking her on hunting trips. However, Chana later revealed that she found pleasure in harming animals, often bringing home dead creatures. When Chana turned 12, she formed a problematic friendship with an older man who introduced her to harmful substances and took advantage of her vulnerability. 2 years later, her mother moved to New Zealand, leaving Chana and her siblings in the care of their father and stepmother. At 15, Chana became involved with a 22-year-old man who had an unhealthy interest in Satanism, occultism, and voodoo cults. Fortunately, By her 17th birthday, Chana's life started to take a positive turn. She distanced herself from harmful relationships, successfully graduated from high school, and enrolled in college to study art and graphic design. After abandoning her interest in Satanism and ceasing to use harmful substances, Chana's emotional well-being significantly improved. She excelled in her studies and eventually secured a job in her chosen field. Chana's new job provided her with a supportive community, including her colleagues and management, where she discovered her talent for visual arts, earning her respect and recognition. She also started dating Warren, giving the impression to outsiders, including her family and close friends, that her life was back on track. However, beneath the surface, her inner struggles persisted. Her father was especially relieved, hoping she had finally grown up and would soon get married. But an unexpected obstacle emerged, threatening to disrupt her newfound stability. Warren's friend Roy, who claimed to be highly sensitive, sensed a dark and malevolent presence in Chana, despite her kind and friendly nature. His concerns were dismissed due to the contrast between his perceptions and her outward appearance. One day, Roy approached Chana, asking about Norman, a name that kept appearing in his mind, implying she might be unfaithful to Warren. Chana's response was shocking. She spat in his face and demanded he stop questioning her. Chana's friend, Norman, was later revealed to be the name of her imaginary childhood friend, Zazzle. This discovery changed the dynamics among their group of friends. At a party, Chana became interested in 24-year-old Martin. Martin came from a respected and wealthy family, unlike Chana. He had a good relationship with both his parents and was smart, well-mannered, and performed well in school. However, Martin had been struggling with a mental illness since he was 6 years old. He started having hallucinations, claiming that an entity appeared to him, making him believe he had incredible strength. As Martin grew older, his mental condition worsened, leading to problems at school and home. At 14, he was hospitalized in a psychiatric facility and diagnosed with schizophrenia. Although conventional treatment didn't work, his family and doctors eventually found the right medication to control his condition, except for occasional outbursts of aggression. Chana and Martin, two unstable young individuals, started a romantic relationship. Despite their outward appearance of happiness, their parents were oblivious to the issues the couple had faced in the past. As their relationship progressed, it ultimately led to devastating consequences. At first, the couple was social and outgoing, attending parties and interacting with others. Friends recalled noticing cuts on their hands, which they jokingly attributed to intimate experiments. However, as time passed, Chana and Martin began to withdraw from their social circle and developed an interest in dark practices, including Satanism, voodoo, and occult rituals. This fascination eventually extended to infamous serial killers. In 2011, Martins posted a photo with his girlfriend Chana on social media, captioned "Killers" with an ambiguous emoji. At the time, no one took the post seriously. However, unbeknownst to others, the couple had dark fantasies that eventually turned into a sinister plan. They wanted to torture and kill homeless people, and even practiced on animals. But their plan was put on hold, as they couldn't find a suitable victim. Chana created a profile on a dating site and caught the attention of Michael Van Eck. The couple targeted him for their twisted plan, and Chana suggested they meet in person. Michael agreed, despite the unusual meeting location. Chana and Martins carefully prepared for the date, planning every detail, including what to wear and how to end Michael's life. Chana approached the meeting fully prepared, and the trap was set. Michael fell for the bait, and Martins attacked him from behind with a knife. Despite being stabbed around 30 times, Michael resisted, which caught the attackers off guard. Chana intervened, and together, they overwhelmed Michael, who begged them to end his suffering. After the attack, Martin slit his own throat, and the couple began to dismember Michael's body. They severed his legs and decapitated him, placing the body parts in bags. They buried the body in a shallow grave, but couldn't make it deep enough due to lacking shovels. They then left the scene with the body parts, using Michael's car, which they later abandoned in a troubled neighborhood. The next day, a cemetery worker discovered the grave and alerted the authorities. Meanwhile, Michael's parents were frantically searching for him, and his workplace reported him missing. The police found Michael's car, which led them to the cemetery, where they uncovered the gruesome crime scene. The local police were already investigating a mysterious body found on the cemetery grounds, with all signs pointing to foul play. They brought Michael Van Eck's family into the picture, as he had gone missing a day earlier. At the cemetery, Michael's mother identified her son's body by recognizing his personal belongings and distinctive childhood burn scars. The autopsy revealed that Michael had suffered multiple knife wounds and signs of struggle. The body had been dismembered after death, with a level of professional precision suggesting the perpetrators had experience with such acts. The evidence pointed to multiple attackers being involved, given the number and nature of the wounds, as well as the strength required to overpower the victim. DNA testing confirmed the body was 23-year-old Michael Van Eck's. During the investigation, police seized Michael's phone and computer, tracing his last communication to Chav Van Haan, who had invited him to the cemetery on the fateful night. When questioned, Chav and her boyfriend Martin confessed to their involvement in the murder. Chav's father was shocked by her calm and defiant confession, in which she claimed to have dreamed of committing such a crime since she started hunting with him. The lack of remorse from the couple shocked everyone, and they seemed to relish the public attention. They had planned to take their own lives if caught, but later changed their minds, wanting to live the life of monsters. The police search of the couple's apartment revealed a disturbing environment. The walls were covered in distorted portraits of Chav, depicting her without eyes, mouth, or ears in various guises. The police found disturbing evidence in the rooms, including ritual items, animal scalps, knives, and unknown objects. They also discovered the belongings of the murdered him, including his glasses and wallet. Martins later admitted that they took the victim's money to fund their next crime. The most shocking discovery, however, was made in the refrigerator. The police found the victim's head with his mouth sewn shut, which suggested that the couple planned to use it as a ritual bowl. Additionally, the victim's eyes and ears were found in separate containers. The police also found the victim's hand and leg buried near the murderer's home, along with the bodies of several animals. The girl's diary revealed her dark thoughts and plans. The evidence suggested that the couple derived pleasure from taking lives and mutilating bodies. Both Martins and Chana underwent mental evaluations, and the commission confirmed that they were aware of their actions and desired the consequences. In November 2011, Chana stood trial as a serial offender, despite it being a single incident. She openly admitted that she did not feel remorse and desired to repeat her actions. Psychiatrists diagnosed Chana with psychopathic and antisocial disorders, making her a more dangerous individual. Throughout the trial, she remained emotionless. Chana was found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison without parole, with 20 years for murder and an additional 15 years for robbery and dismemberment. Martins defended himself in court, claiming that he did not remember the events until he was in jail. He admitted to studying Satanism and occultism, which he believed pushed him and Chana to commit the crime. During the trial, he apologized to the victim's parents, although his apology sounded insincere. He implied that the victim was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, when in reality, the couple had lured him into a premeditated trap. Michael's mother was overcome with grief and struck Martins during one of the sessions. In the end, Martins was also found guilty and sentenced to 35 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of his sentence. After 2014, Chana and her lover Martins maintained a relationship through letters while he was in prison. In these letters, Martins referred to Chana as a dark goddess and wrote poetic phrases such as, "When you part your lips, words of a dead butterfly spill out." and they fall upon my mystical heart and paint it with sweet poison. However, over time, Chana ended the relationship, feeling that they had become emotionally disconnected from each other. While in prison, Chana exhibited exemplary behavior, teaching her fellow inmates art and theology. Some collectors, fascinated by notorious criminals, paid large sums for a photograph of Chana with her autograph, as well as a print of her hand. Martins also attracted a following, with a fan club that was monitored by the police for a long time, to prevent his followers from emulating his violent actions. Despite his circumstances, Martins continued to receive therapy and completed his education through correspondence courses. Ultimately, the case highlights how two unstable individuals, driven by their desires and lacking boundaries, can destroy an innocent life. Furthermore, it reveals how some people, often hiding behind a seemingly normal facade, can harbor dark and sinister intentions. Unfortunately, new acquaintances can sometimes have a profoundly negative impact on our lives, marking a point of no return. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lacey Peterson. Lacey Rocha was born on May 4, 1975, to Sharon and Dennis, but her parents divorced when she and her older brother Brent were still young. After the divorce, Lacey's mother married Ron, a dairy farmer, who became a father figure to her and played a significant role in her upbringing. Lacey was a cheerful and outgoing person with an infectious smile and bubbly nature. She loved talking to people and was always eager to engage in conversations, which made her a natural attention seeker. She thrived in social situations and was known for her ability to light up a room with her presence. Growing up on a dairy farm, Lacey developed a strong connection with nature. She spent much of her childhood exploring the outdoors and enjoying the beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite activities was gardening with her mother, which became a source of joy and fulfillment for both of them. Lacey's love for gardening would later influence her interests and career choices as an adult. Lacey was a cheerleader at Thomas Downey High School, which was a great fit for her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a strong impression on her school and became the ideal cheerleader. After graduating, Lacey attended California Polytechnic University, where she studied ornamental horticulture due to her interest in plants and wildlife. Lacey frequently visited a friend who worked at a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, a co-worker of her friend. Lacey was immediately attracted to Scott and was smitten. She took the initiative and gave Scott her phone number. Scott quickly reached out, and they surprisingly hit it off during their first conversation. Scott then asked Lacey on their first date, a deep-sea fishing trip. However, things didn't go as planned for Lacey, who ended up getting seasick. After a rocky start, Lacey and Scott's relationship blossomed, and they eventually decided to live together. Before meeting Lacey, Scott had aspirations to become a professional golfer, but as their relationship progressed, his focus shifted, and he chose to pursue a career in business instead. Lacey graduated from Cal Poly in 1997, and Scott followed suit the next year. This milestone marked the beginning of a new era in their lives, full of promise and potential. On August 9, 1997, the couple tied the knot in Ayala Valley, San Luis Obispo County. The beautiful resort setting provided a stunning backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by friends and family, they celebrated their love and solidified their commitment to each other. After getting married, Lacey and Scott embarked on a new business venture, opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. The Shack, owned by Lacey and Scott, started off slowly but eventually attracted a steady stream of customers, with weekends being particularly busy. After several successful years, the couple decided to sell the bar in 2000, seeking new opportunities despite its stable income. Following the sale, they moved to Lacey's hometown of Modesto, California, and purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. Lacey took on a part-time job as a substitute teacher, while Scott worked for a European fertilizer company. Lassie devoted herself to supporting Scott, taking care of the home, cooking, and cleaning. She made sure their home was always warm and inviting. In 2002, the couple received exciting news. Lassie was pregnant, and they were expecting a baby. Lassie and Scott were expecting a baby boy, with a due date set for February 10, 2003. They had already chosen the name Connor for their unborn child. On December 24, 2002, Scott stated that he left their house at 9:30 a.m. to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina. Scott said he left Lassie at home on Christmas Eve morning with a busy day ahead of her. She was planning to watch a Martha Stewart show, clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and walk their dog, Mackenzie, at the park. However, one of their neighbors found Mackenzie wandering outside their home around 10:30 a.m. and returned the dog to their backyard. When Scott came home from fishing that afternoon, he said the house was empty, with Mackenzie in the yard, but no sign of Lassie. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott claimed he showered and washed his dirty fishing clothes as soon as he got home. After his shower, Scott realized Lassie was missing and became concerned. He called her mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron, but they hadn't heard from her all day and were worried about her safety. As the day went on and Lassie remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They stressed to the police how urgent it was to find Lassie, who was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police then questioned Scott about his whereabouts and activities on the day Lassie vanished. Scott told police he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, about 90 miles from his home in Modesto, where he lived with his pregnant wife, Lassie. However, from the start, police suspected foul play in Lassie's disappearance. Initially, police didn't treat Lassie's case as suspicious after Scott and his mother-in-law filed a missing person report. Lassie's family defended Scott, and the couple seemed perfect, making it hard to imagine Scott harming his wife. As the investigation continued, police grew suspicious of Scott. About a month after Lassie vanished, they made a stunning discovery. Scott had 2 secret affairs and a long-term relationship with Amber Fry, who contacted police on December 30, 2002, after learning Scott was a suspect in Lassie's disappearance. Amber said she met Scott on November 20, 2002, and thought he was single. 2 weeks before Lassie's disappearance, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that the upcoming Christmas would be his first without his wife. This revelation raised suspicions among the police, who wondered if Scott had already planned to kill his pregnant wife. To gather evidence, the police asked Amber to make a recorded phone call to Scott, hoping to capture a potential confession. The police informed Lassie's family about Scott's infidelities, and it was when they showed Lassie's mother a photo of Scott and Amber together that she became convinced of his guilt. The search for Lassie was highly comprehensive due to the involvement of the police, her loved ones, and numerous volunteers. In the first 2 days alone, more than 900 people participated in the search efforts. During a press conference, a police officer working on Lassie's case raised concerns that she may not have left her house voluntarily on December 24, 2002. Lassie's disappearance sparked widespread media attention, with the tragic and intriguing tale of a beautiful young woman vanishing from her home on Christmas Eve, captivating the public's imagination. As the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance, the spotlight on Lassie's case intensified. When Lassie Peterson vanished on December 24, 2002, a $25,000 reward was initially offered for information leading to her safe return. As the investigation yielded no leads, the reward was increased to $500,000 to boost awareness and gather more information. To keep Lassie's case in the public eye, posters were prominently displayed in Modesto, California, and a friend's husband created a website to spread the word. Months later, on April 13, 2003, a couple walking their dog in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park stumbled upon a gruesome discovery in a marshy area. They found the decomposing body of a male infant. The next day, another person discovered the body of a pregnant woman on the east side of the bay shore, about a mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies were indeed those of Lassie and her unborn son, Connor. Lassie and Connor were laid to rest at Burwood Cemetery. The autopsy revealed disturbing evidence. The baby had 1.5 loops of nylon tape around his neck and a significant cut on his body. Lassie's autopsy showed even more brutal injuries. 2 cracked ribs, her upper torso hollowed out with internal organs removed, and she was missing her head and limbs. The medical examiner concluded that the baby died in the womb and was expelled from Lassie's body after her death. Investigators from the FBI and Modesto Police Department searched the home of Scott and Lassie, looking for evidence of their involvement in her disappearance. The search turned up several crucial clues, including a hair found in Scott's pliers on his fishing boat. After analyzing the hair, the FBI matched it to Lassie's DNA. In addition to the home search, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse, seeking any evidence linking him to Lassie's disappearance. The FBI searched Scott's boat and found a homemade anchor that he claimed was made from a 90-pound bag of concrete, which he had used to repair his driveway. However, the prosecution believed that Scott had created multiple anchors and used 4 of them to weigh down Lassie's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies found in the bay were later identified as Lassie and Connor, leading to Scott's arrest near a golf course. Notably, Scott's appearance had changed significantly. His dark brown hair was now blonde. When arrested, Scott's vehicle was found to be packed with various items, including a large sum of cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. The police also discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses, one belonging to Scott and the other linked to his brother. This evidence suggested to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. Scott's father offered an alternative explanation for the driver's license found in Scott's possession. According to his father, Scott had borrowed his brother's license to get a discount at a golf course. As for why Scott's car was packed, his father claimed it was because Scott was living out of his car to avoid the media, who were camping outside his house at the time. Scott's trial began in June 2004, a year after his arrest. During the opening arguments, the prosecution presented its case to the jury, arguing that Scott had killed Lassie because of his affair with Amber Frey. The prosecution highlighted Scott's suspicious behavior in the days leading up to and following Lassie's disappearance, pointing out inconsistencies in his statements to the police. Scott initially told the police he was fishing on the day Lassie went missing, but later told others he was golfing. The prosecution also noted that Scott asked the police if they had used cadaver dogs to search a park where Lassie was supposed to walk their dog, implying that Scott was aware of the potential crime scene and trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense team presented a strong argument in court, highlighting that Scott's history of infidelity did not necessarily prove he was guilty of murdering his wife. They reasoned that Scott would not give up his life for someone he had only dated 4 times. The defense suggested that Lassie's hair might have been found in Scott's boat because she had visited the marina with him before. During the trial, 2 of Lassie's relatives testified that Scott showed no emotional response when his pregnant wife went missing. New evidence emerged when a realtor testified that Scott tried to sell their home in January, a month after Lassie's disappearance. Additionally, a salesman revealed that Scott traded in Lassie's car after she vanished. The prosecution viewed these events as incriminating evidence against Scott. Amber Frey, Scott's mistress, took the stand and shared details of their affair. The jury listened to secret recordings of Amber's phone calls with Scott, including one where he lied about being in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and tide expert testified that it was possible for Lassie's body to have been dumped in the area where Scott claimed to be fishing on the day Lassie went missing. However, The defense team argued that there was a lack of credible evidence directly linking Scott to the crime. Their theory was that someone had kidnapped Lacey on Christmas Eve 2002, holding her captive until she gave birth to Connor, and then disposing of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. The defense attorney emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to connect Scott directly to the crime, and that other suspects could have been responsible. A significant issue arose during the trial when a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted unauthorized research on the case, violating legal procedures. Additionally, the foreman of the jury asked to be removed, and it was determined that his removal was necessary to ensure a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a California jury found Scott guilty of 2 murder counts: first-degree murder for killing his wife Lacey, and second-degree murder for killing their unborn son Connor. The charge of first-degree murder for Lacey's killing carried special circumstances because of the involvement of the fetus, making Scott eligible for the death penalty. After his conviction, the trial entered the penalty phase to determine his punishment. In this phase, the jury considered various factors, including Scott's prior criminal history, circumstances that aggravated the crime, and circumstances that mitigated it. The jury unanimously agreed that Scott should receive the death penalty. After reviewing the evidence, the judge upheld the jury's verdict. He concluded that Lacey's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous, which led to Scott being sentenced to death. As is automatic in such cases, the sentence was appealed, and the California Supreme Court heard the case in June 2020. During the appeal, Scott's lawyers presented several arguments. They claimed that some potential jurors were unfairly dismissed, that 2 jurors were improperly allowed onto Scott's boat, and that the trial should have been moved to a different county due to biased questionnaire results, which showed that almost half of the potential jurors thought Scott was guilty before the trial even started. The state countered that there was no evidence to support the claim that any juror was unfairly dismissed, and that none of the 12 jurors who ultimately decided Scott's fate were biased. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld Scott's conviction, but overturned his death sentence. In 2004, a judge resentenced Scott to life in prison without parole, which led to his transfer from San Quentin State Prison to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. Around the same time, on April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, UVVA, into law. Lacey's mother and stepfather attended the signing ceremony. Lacey and Connor's law was designed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases where their mothers were victims of violence. The legislation recognizes the unborn child as a separate legal entity from their mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child during an attack on a pregnant woman. The law acknowledges that an unborn child is a victim of violence and deserves the same rights and protections as any other human being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Chris Watts. Shanann Razuchek and Christopher Watts, both from North Carolina, met in 2012. Shanann was from Aberdeen and Chris was from Spring Lake. They tied the knot on November 3, 2012, but not everyone was thrilled about their union. Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie Watts, didn't attend the wedding, with Cindy later explaining that she didn't get along with Shanann and didn't like how she treated her son. A year after getting married, Shanann and Chris moved to Frederick, Colorado, marking a fresh start in their lives. They were excited to start a family and eventually welcomed 2 daughters, Bella Marie, born on December 17, 2013, and Celeste Catherine, Cece, born on July 17, 2015. Shanann had been diagnosed with lupus, a chronic autoimmune disease, at a young age. Despite the challenges this presented for getting pregnant, Shanann defied the odds and became a mother twice. She was known for her kindness, compassion, and positivity, and was determined to create a happy life for herself and her family. Shanann was a loving and exceptional mother, and her vibrant personality drew people to her. Every morning, she would send her friends heartfelt texts that read, "Good morning, beautiful," making them feel cherished and uplifted. Her daughters, Bella and Cece, were the center of her universe, and she devoted herself to nurturing and supporting them. Shanann was active on social media, sharing videos that offered a glimpse into her daily life and that of her daughters. Her friends and family cherished these videos, which showcased her warm personality. In many of these videos, Shanann expressed her deep admiration for her husband, Chris, portraying him as a loving husband and father. However, those close to the family found Chris difficult to connect with on a deeper level, as he tended to keep to himself. Despite their reservations, Shanann's family and friends accepted Chris because of her deep love for him. However, the couple was struggling financially, and in June 2015, they filed for bankruptcy due to a heavy mortgage, multiple car payments, loans, medical bills, and significant credit card debt. At the time, Chris worked at Anadarko Petroleum, while Shanann worked at a children's hospital call center. However, by 2016, Shanann had changed careers, becoming a consultant for a multi-level marketing company, selling a nutritional supplement administered through a patch. Shanann loved her job, and it showed. As her co-worker Cynthia de Rosette put it, she had a way of making everyone she met feel her positive energy. Despite being happy with her life, Shanann had one wish: to have a baby boy to complete her family with her husband and 2 daughters. In spring 2018, Shanann got an unexpected but wonderful surprise. She was pregnant again. Overjoyed and excited, she wanted to capture her husband Chris's reaction. So she planned to surprise him on May 28th with the news. Further tests confirmed Shanann was having a baby boy. Shanann and Chris chose the name Nico for their new baby. When they told their daughters Bella and Cece they would be big sisters, the girls were happy. In the summer of 2018, when Shanann was pregnant with Nico, she visited her family in North Carolina while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. Shanann took her daughters, Bella and Cece, to visit Chris's parents, Cindy and Ronnie, despite having a strained relationship with them. During the visit, Cindy prepared a snack for Cece without considering Shanann's prior warning about Cece's severe nut allergy. As a result, the snack contained peanuts, which put Cece's life in danger. Shanann was deeply disturbed by this incident, feeling that Cindy had recklessly disregarded her granddaughter's safety. Shanann expressed her outrage and disappointment in a text message to Chris, accusing his mother of intentionally trying to provoke her by putting Cece's life at risk. She urged Chris to confront his father about Cindy's behavior, implying that if Chris didn't take action, it would suggest he was complicit in his mother's harmful actions, and that Shanann's concerns for her children's safety were justified. While Shanann was visiting her family in North Carolina, she noticed a sudden change in Chris's communication style. He stopped responding to her messages and calls, leaving her confused and concerned. When she asked him what was going on, Chris explained that he had taken on more responsibilities at work due to the arrival of new employees, but reassured her that everything was fine. A week later, Chris flew to North Carolina to spend time with Shanann and their 2 daughters, Bella and Cece. The girls were excited to see their father and ran to hug him as soon as he arrived. Chris was enthusiastic in his greeting, scooping them up in a tight hug. However, his greeting to Shanann was noticeably colder. Instead of a kiss, he simply nodded at her. Shanann felt hurt and surprised by Chris's distant behavior, and she couldn't help but confide in a friend about her growing concerns through a text message. Shanann felt like she was living with a stranger, not the man she married. She was saddened and confused by the change in Chris. When they were in the same room, he refused to talk to her, and instead, they communicated through their phones. Shanann sent a heartbreaking text to her friend, explaining the situation, and even shared a photo of them sitting on separate couches, facing away from each other. Shanann suspected that Chris might be interested in someone else, which shocked her friend. However, her friend disagreed, saying that Chris loved Shanann too much to do that. But Shanann was devastated because Chris had told her that he no longer thought they were compatible. This was a huge surprise to Shanann, who had always believed their love was strong. Chris had confessed to Shanann that he had hoped getting her pregnant would change his feelings, but it didn't. Shanann was devastated to hear this, as she treasured their relationship and thought their love could overcome any obstacle. Desperate to save her family, Shanann proposed that they attend couples counseling to work through their issues. However, Chris refused. Shanann was willing to do whatever it took to rescue their relationship, but she realized Chris was not willing to meet her halfway. Despite her best efforts, Shanann came to understand that Chris was unwilling to compromise on anything. After their return to Colorado from North Carolina, the family settled back into their routine. However, Shanann soon left for another business trip, this time to Arizona. During her trip to Arizona, Shanann's friends noticed a change in her behavior. She seemed confused, distressed, and not her usual cheerful self. One evening, while they were all in their hotel room, Shanann opened up to her friends about her concerns. She told them that Chris had expressed doubts about their relationship and refused to go to couples therapy. On August 11th, while Shanann was still in Arizona, she received a notification on her phone about a restaurant charge on her and Chris's account. The amount of the charge raised her suspicions, and she wondered if Chris was having dinner with someone else. This made her feel uneasy and doubtful. When Shanann returned home from her trip on August 13th, her friend Nicole Atkinson drove her home. Their doorbell camera captured Shanann entering her house at around 1:48 a.m. The next morning, Shanann's friends became worried when they didn't receive their usual good morning messages from her. They knew she had an important doctor's appointment at 9:30 a.m. and were concerned that something might be wrong. When Shanann missed a 12:30 p.m. business meeting, her close friend Nicole Atkinson became alarmed. As the day went by with no word from Shanann, Nicole's concern grew. She sensed something was off. Feeling a strong urge to act, Nicole drove to Shanann's house. As she arrived, she felt a knot in her stomach. Shanann's van was parked in the garage, and her daily shoes sat by the front door. Nicole knocked on the front door, hoping Shanann would emerge, explaining that she had overslept after her flight the previous day. But there was no response. One of Shanann's friends contacted her husband Chris, telling him they couldn't reach her. Chris reassured them, thinking Shanann might have taken their daughters to a friend's house. Shannan's friends were puzzled by Chris's response, because they had all been in touch with each other, and none of them knew where Shanann was. She had no plans to meet up with any of them. As a result, her friends told Chris they planned to contact the Frederick Police Department to report Shanann and their daughters, Bella and Cece, as missing. However, Chris did not want to involve the police. One of Shannan's friends, Nicole, was so worried that she went ahead and called 911 to report the three missing. After Nicole's call, a police officer from the Frederick Police Department arrived at the Watts home. The officer's body cam footage showed Nicole's distress as she explained what she knew about Shanann and her daughters. When Chris arrived, he approached the officer, but unlike Nicole, he did not appear to be very concerned, despite his wife and daughters being missing. During a search of Shanann and Chris's home, the officer found Shannan's purse, which contained her medication and that of her two daughters. This finding concerned Shannan's friend Nicole, but Chris, her husband, remained unusually calm. The officer also discovered Shannan's wedding pants on the bedside table. Afterwards, the officer and Chris went to a neighbor's house to review the footage from their security camera. The camera captured footage of Chris's driveway and garage, showing him opening the garage door, moving around, and leaving the house at 5:28 a.m. When Chris watched the footage with the police, his behavior changed. He became nervous and fidgety. which didn't go unnoticed by his neighbor, who suggested to the officer that Chris wasn't acting normal. Chris's reluctance to search for his wife and daughters, Bella and Cece, raised concerns among Shannon's friends, who found it incomprehensible that he wasn't worried about their disappearance. As the investigation unfolded, the police canvassed the neighborhood, asking residents if they had seen Shannon or anything unusual. The FBI and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search the next day, along with the Boulder Police Department's cadaver dogs, which searched the property and inside the house. During the search, an officer handling a cadaver dog commented that the house smelled of cleaning products and seemed unusually clean. The officer's suspicions were raised by a comment, leading them to inspect the cleanliness of the home more closely. The presence of cleaning products hinted that someone might have tried to hide evidence or erase potential clues. While his house was being searched, Chris gave an interview to 2 Denver news stations outside his residence. During the interview, Chris claimed that he and Shannon hadn't argued before she left, but he did mention they had an emotional conversation. Chris appealed to whoever was holding his family, begging for their return and expressing his desire to be reunited with them. He emphasized that his house felt empty without them, but his behavior during the interview raised concerns. Chris appeared cold and unemotional, which surprised those who knew him. Shannon's friends, who watched the interview, were disgusted by Chris's nonchalant demeanor, finding it strange and contradictory to his plea for his family's return. On August 14th, Special Agent Coda conducted an interview with Chris. During the conversation, Chris suggested that Shannon might have taken the girls to a friend's house to unwind. Meanwhile, the police station received a flood of tips about possible sightings of Shannon and the girls. The department received various photos, which Chris was asked to review to see if he could identify his missing wife and daughters. However, he was unable to provide any identifications. Agent Coda also asked Chris about his marriage to Shannon during the interview. Chris claimed that he had never been unfaithful to Shannon, and, to the best of his knowledge, she had never been unfaithful to him either. He explained that they were the type of couple who would confide in each other if they ever felt tempted to stray. One notable aspect of Chris's behavior during the interview caught Agent Coda's attention. Chris frequently made hand movements towards his neck. Agent Coda's intuition was growing stronger, suggesting the movements might be pointing to a more sinister truth. During the interview, Agent Coda stepped out briefly to share his concerns with the other officers, suspecting Chris might have strangled Shannon. As the hours ticked by with no sign of Shannon and her daughters, the loved one's anxiety turned to desperation. Despite their fears for Shannon's safety, they held on to the glimmer of hope that Bella and Cece might still be alive. The lack of updates from the authorities only added to their distress. After a 3-hour interrogation, Chris was released from the police department, but the police instructed him to return the next day, August 15th, for a polygraph test. Here's what happened. Chris agreed to take a polygraph test to help with the investigation into his family's disappearance. On August 15th, Chris picked up his father from the airport and went to the Frederick Police Department, where Tammy Lee from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation administered the test. During the test, Chris denied any involvement in his family's disappearance and claimed not to know where his wife Shannon was. However, the results of the test were not in Chris's favor. This led the detectives to strongly suspect that Chris was responsible for the deaths of his wife and daughters. Tammy Lee, a highly skilled polygrapher, confronted Chris about the test results. Chris admitted that he had caused Shannon emotional pain, but denied physically harming her. He also confessed to having an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger, which he deeply regretted. Despite his confessions, Chris still denied any involvement in his family's disappearance. At one point, he asked to have his father, Ronnie, present during the interview. The officers were hesitant, worried that this might lead Chris to ask for a lawyer. Chris Watt's father was allowed to accompany him in the interrogation room, a risky move that detectives hoped would prompt Chris to confess. And it worked. Chris admitted to killing Shanann, but claimed he did so because she had harmed their daughters, Bella and Cece. However, this excuse was immediately met with skepticism by Shanann's friends, who knew she would never hurt her children. In fact, Shanann was eagerly awaiting the birth of her third child, a son named Nico. During the interrogation, Chris disclosed the location of Shanann's body, which he had buried in a shallow grave at one of his work sites. He also revealed that he had disposed of his daughters' bodies in oil tanks. Despite this, Chris continued to deny any involvement in their deaths. Even after being arrested and taken into custody, the detectives never believed Shanann was responsible for harming her daughters. In the end, Chris pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. At the sentencing hearing for Chris, the judge expressed outrage over the brutal crime Chris had committed, calling it the most inhumane and vicious one he had seen in his entire career of handling thousands of cases. Years later, Chris confessed to murdering his wife Shanann in their bed. According to Chris, he strangled her after she discovered his infidelity and threatened to take their daughters away. Chris then put Shanann's body in his truck and drove to his work site with their two daughters. Tragically, Chris admitted to killing his daughters one by one at the site, with one daughter forced to witness the murder of her sister before meeting the same fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brooke Skylar Richardson. In Ohio, the Richardson family, consisting of Kim, Scott, and their children, Jackson and Skylar, seemed like a typical family. Skylar was a cheerleader who struggled with an eating disorder from a young age. Her mother Kim first noticed this when Skylar was 12 years old and refused to buy gum with more than 5 calories. As a flyer on the cheerleading squad, Skylar felt pressured to maintain a certain weight. This obsession with her body image led to a constant fear of gaining weight. During cheerleading season, Skylar started throwing up after meals to control her weight, which only made her issues worse. When the season ended, her struggles intensified. Skylar experienced episodes of binge eating, followed by periods of starvation or extreme dieting. Her parents grew concerned, but Skylar shut down whenever they tried to talk to her about it. They sought professional help from various doctors and therapists, who eventually diagnosed Skylar with body dysmorphia, a condition where she obsessively focused on a perceived flaw in her appearance. In July 2016, Skylar began dating a friend's cousin, but the relationship didn't last long. By January 2017, she had moved on to a new boyfriend, Brandon, and seemed genuinely happy and healthy. Her parents noticed her weight gain and thought her eating disorder was under control. In February, Skylar picked out her prom dress, a tightly fitted gown that required her to be laced into it. During a family vacation in mid-March, she wore a 2-piece bathing suit and looked wonderful. Her mom, Kim, wanted her to start taking birth control pills to protect her health. In mid-April 2017, Skylar visited her mother's gynecologist to obtain a prescription for birth control. However, during the visit, the doctor informed Skylar that she was approximately 8 months pregnant. Skylar requested the doctor not to tell anyone, and her mother remained unaware of the real reason behind her tears. Skylar and her boyfriend Brandon attended the prom on May 5th, despite her advanced pregnancy. 2 months later, on July 14, 2017, the police showed up at the Richardson home. They informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, that they needed to speak to the teenager about something she may have witnessed. The police officers assured the parents that Skylar was not in trouble and took her at their word. Scott decided to drive Skylar to the police station, unsure of what awaited them. The police wanted to question Skylar regarding a call they received from a gynecologist's office. A patient of an OB/GYN doctor gave birth to a stillborn baby and buried it in their backyard. The police were informed and took Skylar the patient into custody for questioning. Her father was not allowed to be present during the initial interview. The police read Skylar her rights and shared the details of the doctor's report. According to the doctor, Skylar had discovered her pregnancy on April 26th, but later reported that the baby was not alive and had been buried in the backyard. Skylar admitted to the police that she had given birth to a stillborn baby girl on May 7, 2017. She explained that she delivered the baby in the bathroom, noticed it was not breathing, and had no heartbeat. Feeling the need to bury the baby, she retreated to the backyard, dug a shallow grave, and buried the body. To mark the spot, she placed a vase with a flower at the burial site. The police informed Skylar's parents, Kim and Scott, about the true reason for her detention. They were shocked to learn that Skylar had been pregnant, as they had no idea. They expressed sadness that Skylar had gone through this ordeal alone and without their support. Skylar revealed that she had named the baby Annabelle and claimed the father was a close friend's cousin, whom she briefly dated. Crime scene investigators searched the Richardson backyard, removing weeds and debris to uncover the baby's remains. Despite the challenges, they found several bones, including pieces of the skull, which they carefully collected and preserved. After more than 5 hours of questioning, Skylar and her parents were allowed to return home. However, 6 days later, the police contacted Skylar again, informing her that they had received new information from the coroner's office. They claimed that the baby's bones showed signs of burning, which Skylar vehemently denied. She insisted that she would never harm her child. The police suggested that Skylar might have tried to cremate the baby to hide the evidence, but she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, Skylar suddenly changed her story, admitting that she may have used a lighter to try and cremate the baby's remains. She also stated that the baby might have been born alive and made a noise or even cried before dying. Skylar confessed to holding the newborn too tightly, which might have contributed to its death. During a lengthy interrogation, the police gathered enough evidence to arrest Skylar on a charge of reckless homicide. They believed she had suffocated her baby. After presenting the case to a grand jury, Skylar was indicted and arrested for aggravated murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Ohio. At her arraignment, Skylar pleaded not guilty to additional charges of voluntary manslaughter, abuse of a corpse, and endangering children. She spent the weekend in jail until her family secured a $50,000 bond. Skylar became the center of a media frenzy following her child's tragic death. The public judged and scrutinized every move she and her family made, taking a toll on their well-being. They retreated to the safety of their home, but even stepping outside became difficult due to threats and photographers. Despite her defense attorneys believing Skylar gave a false confession, the prosecution pressed forward with their case. Even when the medical examiner retracted her initial report of burning, the prosecution clung to Skylar's admission that she had attempted to cremate the remains. Throughout this period, Skylar's family endured immense stress and fear. The public scrutiny and threats made their lives unbearable, and they struggled to navigate a world under constant scrutiny. Skylar's defense attorneys worked tirelessly to defend her against the charges. Skylar's family raised the $50,000 bail, but as a condition of her release, she was ordered to wear an ankle bracelet. She remained confined to her home, avoiding public appearances. Over 12 months, Skylar's life took a different path. Her university plans were put on hold as she awaited trial for her baby's murder. The charges were serious, and the defense filed a motion to move the trial to a different county, but it was denied. Skylar faced the trial in the original jurisdiction, grappling with the emotional and psychological impact of the allegations and her isolation. Spending time with her dogs provided comfort and companionship as she awaited her trial. Her family stood by her, believing in her innocence and hoping the truth would come to light. Despite the challenges, Skylar remained determined to fight for her freedom. In July 2019, the state offered a plea deal, If Skylar pleaded guilty to the remaining charges, they would withdraw the aggravated murder charge. Skylar's parents were conflicted about the decision, but after careful consideration, Skylar turned down the plea deal. This decision terrified her parents, who wondered if she made the right choice, but they knew it was her decision, not theirs. Skylar went on trial on September 3, 2019 for the murder of her newborn baby girl. The prosecution presented as evidence a text message Skylar sent to her mother shortly after giving birth, saying she was happy and excited that her belly had returned to its normal size. They claimed this showed Skylar was relieved to be rid of her baby. The prosecution alleged that Skylar sent more texts to her mother and boyfriend within 24 hours of the baby's death, conveying her excitement and happiness. They pointed to phrases like, "I'm so excited," and "I feel so much better this morning," as proof of her guilt. The state believed Skylar was thrilled about the baby's death and attempted to hide her guilt. The prosecution also claimed Skylar had no intention of keeping her baby and presented evidence that she had searched online for ways to get rid of the baby. They alleged that Skylar's mother had threatened that her life would end if she became pregnant, which instilled fear in Skylar. On the third day of the trial, a doctor testified that the baby's death was a violent homicide, but admitted she couldn't determine when the baby's skull fractures occurred. The defense challenged the doctor's findings, suggesting she may have been biased. The defense also questioned the doctor's methods, pointing out that she didn't examine the remains under a microscope or consult with an obstetrician. Another doctor, a fetal medicine specialist, testified that it was unlikely the baby was stillborn, citing Skylar's admission that she felt the baby moving inside her. The prosecution's case included shocking evidence, including images of the deceased baby's remains, which visibly affected Skylar during the trial. Skylar's reaction to seeing pictures of her baby's remains was to stare straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. This stoic behavior contrasted with her emotional response the previous day when the judge entered the room. Skylar's defense attorneys argued that her life was far from perfect, even before the murder accusation. They claimed the prosecution's evidence was incomplete and misleading, and some texts were taken out of context. They emphasized that Skylar's frequent use of certain language did not prove she murdered her daughter. The defense highlighted Skylar's mental health struggles, particularly her long battle with an eating disorder. They presented evidence of her regular visits to a psychologist and nutritionist, along with pictures showing her varying weights and appearances. They argued that despite her physical state, Skylar tried to comfort and care for the lifeless body after giving birth. Skylar's attorney explained that she intended to tell her family about the pregnancy, but never had the chance. According to her doctor, she had 8 to 10 weeks before delivery and planned to attend prom and graduate before telling her mother, whom she knew would be unsupportive. An obstetrician testified that the baby was stillborn, and Skylar's description of the baby's appearance suggested it was not a healthy newborn. The doctor pointed out that Skylar only gained 15 pounds during pregnancy, possibly restricting the baby's development due to her eating disorder. The defense aimed to cast doubt on Skylar's statements to the police, suggesting she only told them what they wanted to hear. They argued that other factors may have contributed to the baby's death, and Skylar did not harm the baby. Skylar Richardson's trial lasted for 1 week, after which the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning a verdict. She was acquitted of aggravated murder, involuntary manslaughter, and child endangerment, but convicted of abuse of a corpse, a felony that carries a sentence of up to 1 year in prison. The judge ordered her to be held in jail until her sentencing hearing, which took place the next day. During the sentencing hearing, Skylar apologized for her actions and acknowledged the harm she had caused. The judge strongly admonished her for her role in the tragic loss of her baby, believing that if she had made better decisions during her pregnancy, her child would still be alive today. The judge sentenced her to 3 years probation for abuse of a corpse, emphasizing that her actions were morally reprehensible and illegal. In November 2020, a judge granted her request to terminate her probation 2 years early, acknowledging her progress and agreeing that she no longer required supervision. Since being acquitted, Skylar has taken advantage of her opportunity to demonstrate her rehabilitation. She has completed 2 semesters of college and has been working part-time at the law firm that represented her. Although she has faced challenges in finding employment due to her probationary status, Skylar remains determined to pursue her career goals, including attending law school and becoming a public defender. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Elizabeth Smart. On June 5, 2002, 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart was sleeping in her bedroom in Federal Heights, Salt Lake City, Utah. She shared the room with her sister Mary Catherine, but their peaceful night was about to take a terrifying turn. A soft-spoken man, armed with a knife, climbed through their open window. This woke Mary Catherine, who pretended to be asleep, hoping to protect her sister. The man ordered Elizabeth to be quiet, threatening to harm her if she didn't comply. Terrified, Elizabeth put on her shoes and was taken outside. Mary Catherine waited 2 hours before waking their parents, Ed and Lois Smart. She told them someone had taken Elizabeth, but they didn't believe her at first, thinking she might be dreaming. However, after inspecting the bedroom and finding a cut window screen, they realized Mary Catherine was telling the truth. They immediately contacted the authorities, who arrived and questioned Mary Catherine about the kidnapper. Mary Catherine described the man as having dark hair on his head, arms, and hands. Although he spoke quietly, she recognized his voice as familiar, but couldn't remember where she had heard it before. The police used the Rachel alert system to broadcast information about Elizabeth's abduction to the public, seeking their help in finding her. As part of their investigation, the police looked into people who had toured the Smart family's home, which was for sale at the time. They also searched the family's computer to see if Elizabeth had interacted with anyone suspicious online. The day after the kidnapping, Ed and Lois Smart made a heartfelt appeal on national television, pleading for their daughter's safe return. The police searched all night for the suspicious individual, but couldn't find them, so they ruled out the tip as not credible. Another tip came from a milkman who claimed to have seen a man driving a gray Honda or Nissan on Elizabeth Street around the time of her disappearance. He wrote down the license plate number, but when the police checked, they couldn't find any information on it, so they dismissed the tip. The police investigation was complicated by the many people who showed up at the Smart residence soon after Elizabeth's abduction, which could have contaminated any potential evidence. They questioned a man who had contact with Elizabeth before her abduction, but he was released after they determined he wasn't involved. The search for Elizabeth continued, with over 20 volunteer pilots searching the Salt Lake area from the air, but they found nothing. Tracking dogs indicated they had smelled something in Red Butte Canyon, but the police search of that area yielded nothing. Elizabeth's father, Ed, was exhausted from the search and was hospitalized briefly, but he was determined to keep looking for his daughter. He and his wife, Lois, were barely holding on. But they believed Elizabeth was alive and would come home to them. Ed took a polygraph test to aid the investigation, and the police ruled out the possibility that Elizabeth had staged her disappearance or run away. Mark Claus, whose daughter was kidnapped and murdered, reached out to the Smart family to offer support and share his own experiences. He noted that the internet had helped spread the word about Elizabeth's disappearance, which increased the chances of finding her. The police received information about a man named Brett Michael Edmonds, who was seen in the area around the time of Elizabeth's abduction. They searched for him, but he had relocated to New Mexico and Texas. After a chase, they arrested a man they thought was Brett, but it turned out to be the wrong person. The police investigated a man who resembled a suspect in Elizabeth's case, but they determined he was not involved. Meanwhile, they found Brett Michael Edmonds in West Virginia, where he was hospitalized due to an overdose and liver failure. Despite his critical condition, Brett was conscious and able to speak, allowing the police to question him about Elizabeth's abduction. After interviewing him, the police cleared Brett as a suspect. The police then shifted their attention to Richard Albert Ritchie, a 48-year-old man who had worked at Ed Smart's home for 2 months the previous year. Ed Smart had hired Richard and even gave him a 1990 Jeep Cherokee in exchange for his labor, unaware that Richard had a long history of criminal offenses, including burglary, robbery, and attempted murder. Richard Ritchie denied any involvement in Elizabeth's abduction and claimed to have cooperated fully with the police, providing DNA samples and sitting through 26 hours of interviews. Despite an exhaustive search of his home, the police found no evidence linking him to the abduction. As the search for Elizabeth continued, the Smart family received a promising lead when a witness reported seeing a girl matching Elizabeth's description in Nebraska. However, after investigating the report, the police found no connection to Elizabeth's case. The Smart family remained hopeful but cautious, determined to find their daughter while acknowledging the possibility of false leads. They kept an open mind, knowing that every lead, no matter how promising, had to be thoroughly investigated before they could finally be reunited with Elizabeth. Richard Ritchie was accused of burglary, a second-degree felony, and theft, a Class A misdemeanor, for stealing items from a house in Federal Heights on April 4, 2001. He was also charged with theft, a third-degree felony, for stealing jewelry and a perfume bottle worth $3,500 from the Smart house on June 6, 2001. However, these stolen items were not related to the investigation into Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping. Salt Lake District Attorney David Yoakum announced the charges in a press conference. When Ed Smart confronted Richard Ritchie about the Smart house theft, Ritchie denied it and was subsequently fired. Unfortunately, the police investigation into Elizabeth's abduction suffered a setback in August 2002 when Richard Ritchie, their prime suspect, died from a brainstem injury that caused hemorrhaging. As Ritchie's condition worsened, he lost the ability to communicate or breathe on his own. His family eventually decided to remove him from life support to prevent further suffering. Although Ritchie's death presented a significant challenge to the investigation, the authorities continued their efforts to find Elizabeth Smart's abductor. The investigation into Elizabeth Smart's kidnapping was hindered when the prime suspect was ruled out, causing doubts about the viability of other leads. Around the same time, in August 2002, an 11-year-old girl was brutally attacked and sexually assaulted in her own bedroom. The severity of her injuries was shocking, with every bone in the middle of her face broken. She required surgery, but remained in critical condition. The police arrested a close friend of her father, Javier Sickler, and charged him with burglary, assault, and attempted murder. Sickler claimed to have knocked on the front door of the victim's home, but said he blacked out afterward. Despite initial similarities with Elizabeth Smart's abduction, the police investigated and determined that Javier Sickler was not involved in her kidnapping. As the months passed with no sign of Elizabeth Smart, the police investigating her abduction turned to unorthodox methods to find her. One approach involved consulting psychics who claimed to possess extrasensory perception that could provide clues about her whereabouts. The psychics told investigators that Elizabeth might be found in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. This lead prompted a Seattle-based company to come forward, stating that over a dozen of its members had pinpointed Elizabeth's body using a specialized psychic technique called technical remote viewing. According to the group, their psychic abilities revealed that Elizabeth had been killed shortly after her abduction. However, when officers searched the specified tomb, they found no evidence of Elizabeth's disappearance. In November 2002, Walter Kenneth Holloway was arrested after falsely claiming to be the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart. He contacted the Smart family and the Salt Lake Police Department, demanding a $3 million ransom from Ed and Lois Smart in exchange for their daughter's safe return. Holloway threatened to harm Elizabeth if his demands weren't met. However, the police quickly discovered that Holloway was not involved in the abduction and was simply trying to extort money from the Smart family. They tracked him down to South Carolina and cleared him of any involvement in the case. Ed Smart was outraged by the extortion scheme, feeling that it wasted valuable police resources and distracted them from finding his daughter. In October 2002, Mary Catherine, Elizabeth's sister, had a sudden realization. The voice of her sister's abductor sounded like Emmanuel, a man the family had briefly hired to do some yard work and roofing a year earlier. However, the police had doubts about this lead because Emmanuel had only worked for the family for a short time. A lot of time had passed since the abduction, and Mary Catherine had only heard the abductor's voice briefly. Despite their skepticism, the family worked with a sketch artist to draw a picture of Emmanuel based on their descriptions. The sketch was finally released in February 2003 and was featured on several TV shows, including Larry King Live and America's Most Wanted. A relative of a man named Brian David Mitchell recognized the sketch and contacted the police, providing them with recent photos of him. These photographs enabled authorities to confirm that the sketch was an accurate representation of Brian David Mitchell. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah spotted Brian David Mitchell with a woman and a girl. Recognizing him from news photos as Elizabeth Smart's abductor, they immediately called the police. Brian David Mitchell was accompanied by his wife, Wanda Barzee, when he was found with Elizabeth Smart. The police were quickly alerted and sent to the scene, where they safely rescued Elizabeth Smart and took Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee into custody. After her rescue, Elizabeth's testimony revealed a disturbing account of her 9-month ordeal. She described being taken to a hidden encampment outside Salt Lake City, where she met Wanda Barzee, who played a significant role in her captivity. The camp was a makeshift shelter surrounded by dense foliage, carefully camouflaged to avoid detection. Elizabeth Smart described Wanda Barzee as initially caring and nurturing, offering comfort and warmth. However, as time passed, Barzee's behavior changed, and she began to exert control over Elizabeth. She forced Elizabeth to follow their unusual religious beliefs, insisting that she pray, read scriptures, and participate in religious rituals. One of the most distressing experiences Elizabeth endured during her captivity was being forced to marry Brian David Mitchell. Barzee threatened Elizabeth with physical harm if she refused to comply. The wedding ceremony, which Mitchell claimed was a symbol of eternal love, was actually a sham with no legal basis. It solely served as a means for Mitchell to assert his dominance over Elizabeth. After being forced into a marriage, Brian David Mitchell assaulted Elizabeth. He justified his actions by claiming to be a king, ordained to kidnap virgin brides to fight against the Antichrist. Mitchell believed Elizabeth was the first of many virgins he would abduct, and that she would join him in this fictional battle. During her captivity, Elizabeth suffered unimaginable abuse to prevent her escape. She was chained to a tree with a metal cable, restricting her movement outside her tent. This constant confinement made her feel trapped and helpless, unable to seek freedom. In addition to physical restraint, Elizabeth was also subjected to psychological manipulation. She was forced to take on a new identity, choosing the name Esther after the biblical figure. This name change symbolized the loss of her own identity and the control exerted over her by Mitchell and his accomplice, Wanda Barzee. Elizabeth suffered severe trauma during her captivity, particularly due to the frequent and repeated sexual assaults by Brian David Mitchell, which occurred multiple times a day. This abuse left her deeply traumatized and fearful. In addition to the sexual abuse, Elizabeth was forced to look at explicit materials, which further worsened her trauma and feelings of degradation. Moreover, she lived in constant fear of violence and death, as Brian David Mitchell regularly threatened to kill her. This perpetual state of fear and uncertainty amplified the abuse she endured, leaving her feeling utterly overwhelmed and powerless. To gain more control over Elizabeth, Mitchell would often force her to consume alcohol and drugs. He used these substances to reduce her ability to resist him and make her more vulnerable to his control. As a result, Elizabeth was frequently disoriented and helpless, making it easier for her abusers to commit their atrocious acts. After a lengthy legal process, Wanda Barzee admitted to her role in Elizabeth's kidnapping and was sentenced to 15 years in both state and federal prison, with the sentences to be served concurrently. In 2016, her federal sentence was terminated, and she was transferred from a Texas prison to a Utah prison to begin serving her state sentence. When Wanda Barzee was set to be released in September 2018, Elizabeth Smart, who had become a child safety advocate, strongly objected to her release. Elizabeth believed that Barzee still posed a threat to others, as she had never shown remorse for her actions or any signs of rehabilitation. Despite Elizabeth's protests, Wanda Barzee was released from prison. Elizabeth Smart's protest attracted extensive media attention and brought to light the ongoing concerns about the release of convicted criminals from prison. After a lengthy legal battle, Brian David Mitchell was finally sentenced to life in prison for kidnapping Elizabeth. At his sentencing hearing, Elizabeth took the opportunity to confront her kidnapper directly, delivering a powerful and emotional statement. In her statement, Elizabeth described the immense pain and trauma Mitchell had inflicted upon her, explaining that the 9 months she spent in captivity had stolen a part of her life that she could never recover. Despite this horrific experience, Elizabeth demonstrated remarkable resilience and determination, assuring Mitchell that she would go on to live a good life, unperturbed by the darkness he had brought into her world. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a baby girl named Marie was born in the Philippines to an ordinary family. Concerned about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the difficult decision to send her to the United States, where she believed Marie would have better opportunities for success. As a result, Marie was placed in a foster family with a military background, where she met a young girl named Esther, who was the same age as her. Two young girls quickly became close friends, unaware of a surprising fact that linked them together. What Marie didn't know was that her American foster father was actually her biological parent, making Esther her biological sister. As they grew older, the sisters left their parents' house and decided to start a new life together. They chose to settle in Florida, where they rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club that soon became their favorite hangout spot. Marie Carlson's life was a vibrant reflection of her favorite color, pink. She had always believed that living a beautiful life was essential, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. But everything changed when she met Jeff, and she discovered a new, profound meaning in life: love. They quickly fell for each other, got married, and had a daughter named Paris, a name that symbolized the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained an enigma. His past and last name were shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Marie was driven to succeed in her career. She had set her sights on joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and was studying criminal law to achieve her goal. However, her journey was not without its challenges. As she progressed in her career, the obstacles grew tougher, and despite her best efforts, Marie ultimately left the police service without realizing her dream. Marie's life took a devastating turn due to a mental health disorder that worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child left her with deep emotional scars. As a result, her daily life became increasingly painful, and her relationship with her husband, Jeff, began to suffer. The love they once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The divorce was a difficult but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to prioritize their daughter, Paris. They agreed that it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, allowing her to escape the negativity that had been affecting their home. Despite the challenges, they completed the necessary paperwork amicably and with minimal drama. Throughout the long and difficult divorce process, Marie and Jeff remained dedicated to making decisions that would benefit and care for their daughter, Paris. They remained on good terms and continued to care for each other as friends. Marie was grateful for Jeff's support and made it a priority to spend quality time with Paris, never missing a birthday. Marie had faced many challenges, but she remained determined and refused to surrender. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing in her life: faith. This newfound faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic pastor James Flanders and his wife Tanya. From the moment she stepped into the church, Marie felt a sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming atmosphere, combined with Pastor James Flanders' sincere and heartfelt sermons, made her feel at home. Marie began the process of recovering and healing from her past experiences, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had created a sanctuary where people could find help and support. For Marie, the church became more than just a place of worship. It was a loving community that accepted her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the church's loving atmosphere, Marie began to heal and grow. With each passing day, Marie felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had never known before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once was. Instead, she was a strong and vibrant individual, filled with hope and happiness. As she looked out at the sunny Florida landscape, Marie's eyes shone with a newfound radiance, reflecting the beauty and joy that had blossomed in her soul. The church was more than just a building, it was a community of people who genuinely cared for one another. For Marie, this small community became a second family, filled with love, light, and faith. From the outside, the church appeared ordinary, but inside, it felt like a warm and welcoming home. The people gathered there were united by their shared faith, and time seemed to stand still as they came together. Marie, however, was hiding a secret. She was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was crushing her. She felt ashamed and fearful, and only a few close people knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As the news spread through the quiet town, people began to wonder who the father of the child was. The truth was painful. The father was a man Marie had been dating briefly, but he had turned out to be abusive and hurtful. When Marie became pregnant, he disappeared without a word. Left alone and broken, Marie found solace in the church. The Flanders family and the local community showed Marie and her newborn daughter overwhelming kindness and acceptance. They provided a safe and nurturing environment, filling a vital need in Marie's life by becoming like a substitute family. Through their selfless support, Marie was able to find the courage, optimism, and start the healing process from the trauma of her past. Marie had been feeling trapped in her life, and just 3 months after giving birth to her daughter, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a mysterious message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not just her city, but also her family and friends behind. Marie had been secretly planning her escape, careful not to reveal her intentions to anyone, fearing they would try to talk her out of it. She only hinted at her dreams and expressed her love for her loved ones, making it clear that she was leaving for good. Her departure left many questions unanswered. Where was she going? What path would she take? And would she achieve her dreams? Marie's loved ones were devastated, worried sick about her safety and unsure of what to do next. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was particularly frantic and decided to contact the police to help find her. As the days passed, the worry and fear for Marie's fate only intensified. Marie's sudden disappearance from Fort Walton Beach had barely stopped making headlines when a disturbing revelation emerged. She had left behind her 3-month-old daughter. This news sparked immediate concern from Marie's sister, Esther, who knew her siblings' devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice shaking. "She's always been extremely protective of her kids." Those who knew Marie were shocked by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, particularly with her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was especially stunned when he learned that she had stopped visiting Paris, as they had been inseparable. Now, at 37, Marie had vanished without a trace. While she had the right to start anew, the police couldn't ignore the fact that she had left her young child behind. The police analyzed Marie's recent messages and discovered a peculiar aspect: her writing style had changed significantly from before. This led them to suspect that she might be under duress or that the messages were fabricated. An investigation was launched, which soon impacted Marie's personal life. Questions arose about the identity of her daughter Grace's father and the nature of their relationship with Marie. However, even Marie's sister Esther was unable to confirm or deny these suspicions. The police were faced with a complex web of secrets surrounding Marie's disappearance, including the mysterious messages and the uncertainty about Grace's father. In an effort to clarify the situation, the police spoke with Tanya and James Flanders. They revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing temporarily without explanation. The Flanders also shared that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which could have contributed to her erratic behavior. A few weeks before she vanished, Marie experienced a severe episode of depression. She began taking medication but was forced to stop due to her pregnancy. Feeling extremely unwell, Marie asked the Flanders family to care for her daughter while she rested. After lunch, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya and Grace went out shopping. James stayed with Marie to keep an eye on her, but he left for a short time to go home. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders family immediately launched a search for Marie. They scoured the streets, checking the parking lots of every building, but found no sign of her. Then, James had an idea to check the airport, and to their astonishment, they found Marie's car parked there. Using the spare keys, James drove the car back home. When investigators examined the car, they did not find any suspicious marks or evidence that could lead to Marie's whereabouts. The investigators returned to the airport, hoping to find new leads. Their plan was to review the parking lot camera footage, as the airport is required to keep this information on file. They also hoped to find Marie's ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. However, when they found the ticket, it didn't yield any useful results. The ticket was clean, with no fingerprints or other clues that could aid in the investigation. A search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking ticket didn't contain any fingerprints. To make matters worse, the cameras in the parking lot weren't working on the day Marie disappeared. This lack of footage was a significant setback for the investigation, leaving the question of whether Marie's disappearance was a tragic accident or a carefully planned escape. As the investigation continued, the police began to suspect that Marie's disappearance might be more sinister than initially thought. They reclassified the case as a murder investigation and shifted their focus to the mysterious father of Marie's child, Grace. The police returned to the church, hoping to find some answers to their questions. Who was Grace's father, and what role did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church, where Marie had found solace, was filled with rumors and speculation. Parishioners whispered about Marie's secret and the plan that had been weighing on her mind. Marie had been struggling with depression and had considered an abortion, but the Flanders family, who were eager to expand their family, had strongly opposed this idea. The Flanders asked Marie to leave her baby with them, while hypocritically offering to help her. Unbeknownst to others, they desperately wanted a second child, despite both being over 40. One parishioner claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a reward from above for the Flanders' good deeds. The situation took a turn when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived on the scene. He was not the father of the child but had information that could solve the mystery. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie's pregnancy and had questioned her about the father. Marie lied, saying she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. However, the investigation that followed revealed the truth. Police spoke with Tanya's friends, who were also church members, and eventually, the truth came to light. It turned out that the father of the child was James, and the conception was natural. This meant that James's wife, Tanya, had to silently accept the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' attention, and the Flanders were summoned for questioning once again. Tanya was the only one who showed up for questioning. She confirmed the information and added that she was present when the child was conceived. According to her, everything happened with the mutual consent of all parties involved. After Marie disappeared, disturbing details about her relationship with James and Tanya came to light. It turned out that James was intimately involved with both women, which was not just infidelity but a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and planned to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mysteries surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, rumors about polygamy began circulating among the church parishioners, which shocked Jason when he discovered them. Upon James' return from the hospital, Jason decided to discuss the matter with him. Jason asked James about his relationship with Marie. James was honest and admitted to having a romantic relationship with both Marie and his wife. He revealed that he and Marie had a heated argument before her disappearance, which escalated into a physical fight. However, James insisted that Marie was alive and well at the time of her disappearance. Following their conversation, James decided to resign as pastor and soon left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Shortly before their departure, Marie's family had contacted the Flanders family to collect some of Marie's belongings. As a result, investigators obtained Marie's phone, which may have contained crucial information. The investigation into Marie's disappearance was initially hindered because most of the data on James' phone had been deleted. However, investigators were able to recover some fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This finding raised suspicions, particularly since the case took place in 2011, when digital evidence was easier to erase and surveillance was less widespread. At that time, DNA detection technologies were still in their infancy, making it seem like criminals could easily escape punishment. However, the field of digital forensics was also advancing, and it was this expertise that ultimately helped crack the case. 3 years after Marie vanished, a new program became available that enabled investigators to recover data from phones and computers. This technology allowed them to access messages between Marie and James, which painted a disturbing picture of their relationship. The recovered messages included explicit images, some of which were taken inside a church. Perhaps most damningly, Marie's emails to James revealed her deep desire to leave Fort Walton Beach, fearing the place was cursed. Her messages hinted at her desperation to escape with her child. A chain of unexpected and dramatic events led to the Flanders family's deepest secrets being exposed. Flanders said, "When someone spreads rumors or harms me, I want them to cease to exist." Given James' situation, shrouded in darkness and fear, it's possible he fulfilled this ominous promise. Despite the lack of Marie's body, there was sufficient evidence to issue an arrest warrant for James on charges of second-degree murder. However, the prosecutor faced a significant challenge, convincing the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. James and his lawyer were in a desperate situation with an uncertain future ahead, so they made a drastic decision as a last resort to try and turn things around. If James revealed Marie's body's location, he would be charged with manslaughter, a crime with a more moderate sentence. After years of anguish, Marie's family agreed to this deal. James's words revealed a disturbing truth. He and Marie had a tumultuous relationship, frequently arguing about her struggles with depression. During one heated argument, Marie physically lashed out at James, and in an attempt to calm her down, he inadvertently knocked her to the ground. Tragically, she lost her life. In the aftermath, James was overcome with guilt and regret. He had unknowingly contributed to Marie's death, and his attempts to revive her were unsuccessful. The investigators eventually discovered Marie's body in the yard of James's house, buried 5 feet underground and wrapped in a blanket. The discovery was a shock to everyone involved, as they had been searching for her for years. The consequences of James's actions were severe. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, claimed to have been unaware of James's crime and was deeply shocked by the news of Marie's death. Marie's body was discovered after a delay, which hindered experts from determining the cause of her death. This delayed discovery may have impacted the direction of the investigation. 5 years later, Marie's family and friends were finally able to lay her to rest and find closure at her funeral. Her sister Esther might have even sung a final song in her honor.